Table? Oh, the TV's here. Right, councillors, they don't care. So, councillors, we've got a fair bit still on our agenda, and the hope is that this is the last day of deliberations. What we have is the four big items: development contributions, landfill, Portobello Road and EDU, various aspects of EDU that still have to be finished at the very least. Some of them we've started. Then we've got the decision sheet, and then we have the civic grants and the wash-up at the end. So we can't go beyond 5 p.m. because some of us have other commitments, and in any case we become considerably less productive after 8 or 9 hours here after 5 p.m. So I'm reluctant to do that anyway, and it would be very difficult to find more time next week, but we will if we have to. So my ambition is to get it all sorted out today. Notwithstanding the import of much that's been contributed around the table, we really need to restrict our comments to things that have to be dealt with in this annual plan, rather than things that can be dealt with subsequently through the committee's system or through council. So I'd ask you to do that. And the other request I have is from the Channel 39 guys who are doing the recording. Can we please be aware of microphone placement? Some of us are getting a bit relaxed about keeping our microphones close to us. If it's worth saying, it's worth being heard.
Some of us are having to share. Not that we're bad at sharing.
No, I've noticed you're very, very, very good at sharing, Councillor Keller. So we'll get underway. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Yep.
As I'm chair of the Greater Dunedin Partnership, albeit as a council representative, I feel that I can't take part in deliberations, but I will stay during the question period in case I can contribute to councillors' questions, or the answers to councillors' questions. And if there's any debate on digital office, I will leave the room.
Okay, so we are here to look at item 10, among other things. So, Des, do you want to kick off and just give us a bit of context?
Yes. Good morning, Mayor Cull. Good morning, councillors. One of the things I thought I could start off with is just my key message throughout this whole thing is that sustainable economic development creates and supports social wellbeing for Dunedin. There are key connections between economic development, sustainability and social wellbeing. In fact, these themes are all codependent. You cannot have sustainable economic development without creating strong, healthy communities. Economic wellbeing is tied to growth in wages and social cohesion. When people have strong employment options and innovative companies to work for, they are more likely to feel part of a community. Dunedin needs a more competitive and productive economy so we can deliver more jobs and higher incomes. The economic development strategy is dedicated to delivering this promise. The strategy is about making it easier for business to create new ideas, access export markets, attract skilled workers, link with the world and develop higher value employment. This is big picture thinking that reflects the city's strategic framework. We know there are huge benefits to sustainably growing our economy because it creates those stronger communities with higher value job opportunities and recognition of Dunedin's niche strengths. A growing economy supports employment and high wages. It provides opportunities for families. A government priority is to build a more productive and competitive economy that supports higher incomes and more jobs. This is exactly what Dunedin's economic development strategy aims to achieve. By sustainably developing our local economy, we are creating a better future for ourselves and our children. So that's my key message basically throughout the whole economic. Thank you.
Thanks. I will throw it open to questions, unless you, John, have anything you want to preface.
No, I'm just here to help with any questions, clarification.
Okay. Question, Councillor Law.
Hey, look, I just see there's a recommendation, or in the recommendations, recommendation D of the report, that the three above sums amounting to $123,000 be allocated to funding the Digital Office and Business in Turn program with clear reporting direct to the Greater Dunedin Partnership. Do you believe that's enough? Like, over the last few months, I've become more and more aware of the Digitown and the benefits that that can bring our city. I'm not an IT sort of person, but I'm smart enough to realise that other people are and need this, and it would be invaluable to Dunedin and what it could bring. Would those sums of money make a difference?
Through the chair, those sums of money, I've looked at the whole thing, I've looked at the city's situation as well, I've looked at what we're trying to do in terms of the economy, and I think we can get through in that. I'm not asking for a lot of money. It's easy to come and ask for a lot of money. What I'm trying to do is tighten things up. We've saved some money from the, in one of the, which was basically the upstart scenario. There's money that meant to be paid in February. I held it back. And of course, the reason why we haven't spent that money now is they've morphed into a new entity. So we've got that 50,000 there. I do not. The other thing with the audacious budget, which is another one of the budgets where there's a saving of 25,700. This is because the Polytech and the university have taken on more responsibility, and that has enabled us to pull that back. The other amount there, within my budget, there was a other consultancy which was under the operating budget. I've spent a wee bit of that, but I don't believe in willy-nilly and going out and spending budgets. What you see here is what I'm trying to do is say, look, I'll offer that up, but I'm really, really passionate about the things that I've got there. One being the digital office, because I see this as one of those big strategic initiatives the council's got, and it's been funded the last 3 years through the Digital Community Trust. Now, I realise you will always get people who say, you know, the vision's not big enough, or this is not right, or this is not... It's very difficult to get the perfect scenario. I'm doing it basically on what we've got, and I say I'm going to do that and get the best bang for our buck.
It's actually answered the question I was also going to just ask about, were you comfortable with the digital office in its current form, but you've pretty much said it, so...
With the digital office as it's been a digital community trust where all the reporting has basically gone through those lines. I've just got a few points down here. If you just... The digital office reports to the Digital Community Trust on their progress and achievements against the projects they've underway. They were funded for 3 years under this arrangement. They also prepare a financial report for the trustees, and they meet every 6 weeks. The Digital Office also prepares an annual report for the DCC and other sponsors. They will be preparing their 2014 annual report shortly, with the 1st of July to 2013, basically to the 30th of June 2014. Digital Office also has an annual meeting with councillors to update them on their progress. If you fund this, I have developed with Digital Office a service level agreement, which anyone is welcome to see. And what we're looking at also is a number of things in Digital Office actually come under the economic development strategy. There's 3 themes that it fits within, and basically what we want to do is have a better reporting alignment with that, so you can get better information to council.
Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Just a question, and possibly for John or Des, about the acknowledging that I'm on the board at Otago Museum, but I don't think I've got a conflict asking this question. They submitted that they thought that their work on the Shanghai relationship, which I think comes under EDS, was important and should be acknowledged by a financial contribution or some other arrangement at some stage. How closely are you working with the museum, or are you open to working with the museum to develop a relationship and some benefits off their very strong relationship in their upcoming exhibition?
Perhaps if I answer that question, we've just established an advisory board with the terms of reference for Project Shanghai, and within that we've debated some additional areas that we want to operate within, and have included sporting as part of that project, and I would think that we should also be looking at where we can take advantage of some of the cultural opportunities. So we would be open to engaging with the museum around that. Funding at present for any of those projects under Project Shanghai or the other projects within the Grow Dunedin Partnership go to that board for approval, so there is a process around that. We've got budgets in place, but we are open to discussing with other groups how we can achieve the objectives and aims of our projects with the things that they're wanting to achieve. So we are, pretty responsive in terms of what we can be doing around some of those areas.
Right. And just a simple question on the recommendations that are suggested. I'm just wondering on D whether it should actually read who govern the implementation of the economic development strategy. Have you got the... rather than you govern the economic development strategy? I would have thought you govern the implementation.
Quite happy.
Yeah, thank you.
Quite happy to.
Just as a clarification too, Councillor, you'll be aware that not all of the funding for the relationship with Shanghai comes out of the economic development strategy budget.
I probably should be, but that doesn't mean that I am, Your Worship. I'm still getting my head around some of that stuff.
No, but what I'm pointing out is that some of it comes out of the sister city budgets for trips, etc. So there's a range. Councillor Kelly.
This mightn't be a question for Des, but I don't understand whether we've got a digital 100,000 in our people who want money, extra money in this round thing, and we've also got I've saved some money internally from these. When I say saved, I mean you've adjusted things, and there's therefore some money there that could go into the digital office. I don't quite understand whether there's this amount of money that you're reprioritising and that's sort of your business, although you report back to us about it. And if so, does that 100,000 just, you're sort of telling us as a matter of courtesy that you've rearranged your budget a bit and shifted it over there, or is it something that is out there up for grabs, or having you saved the money, can we spend it on anything we want, or I just don't know how anything fits in with anything.
Good question. Through the chair, I think what I'm trying to demonstrate there is that this is an option. Ultimately, at the end of the day, councillors will make decisions on how the budget is spent. And yes, so I think what I'm putting forward is some options. I don't believe, I'm not one of those people that believe if I've got a budget that I go out there and willy-nilly spend it, because I don't do that. I'm quite tight when it comes to things like that.
So does that mean those, say, I'll just call them savings, although whatever they are, have they come into our budget somewhere as carry forwards or something? Are they in there so as, in theory, at least, we could spend them on something else? But those money that you haven't spent on Audacious or those other things.
This is a staff recommendation, that's all this is, but by and large, going into the budget round, knowing what the rates cap was, staff were told that if there's things that aren't being, don't have an allowance in the budget, they were encouraged to look for things that they could trim in their existing budgets that would enable those things to go ahead if they felt priority-wise that they were more important. So this is the staff's recommendation that the priority for the things that are listed here, those things could be trimmed in order to make room for some other things that have traditionally been added onto the budget during the annual plan, but it is just a staff recommendation.
So they sort of like, sorry, I'm floundering with this, are they sort of like the carry forward ones in a sense, and that they're unspent money from this year?
Through the chair, basically, we've got two of those. The business incubation budget in the past has been 150,000. That has gone towards basically Upstart, as it was called then, and there was 70,000 for the student and entrepreneurship budget, which was Audacious. Okay, going forward into next year, what we're saying is basically the 50,000. I'm looking at 100,000 for the business incubation next year, not 150.
Hang on, Des, I'll just interrupt. This is next year's budget, Councillor Calvert. Oh, right. So if you have a look on the bottom of page 10.2, there's a list there showing what is in the budget for next year, and what Des is recommending is the best bang for your economic development buck would be to make some shifts internally in the economic development budget to make room for these things, so that he's not asking you to take it out of the $202,000.
So they were already in the draft.
These are in the draft
Yes.
budget. He's suggesting you reorganise
Cool.
amounts of money within his draft budget.
Cool.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure whether it's a question for Des, perhaps for John or Chris, and don't take this the wrong way, but if we're looking at the economic development budget, the question in my mind is, how do we ensure the delivery to, like, say, KPIs or measurable targets and that sort of thing is achieved? And I accept that the strategy, you've got your project coordinators and your advisory board working away there. Within the economic development unit, you've got others that are pursuing that, but I just want to understand how we can firm that up. And okay, if we're going to give additional funding, I just want to make sure that I can say to my constituents, well, there are measures in place to ensure that those KPIs are either being met or they're, being pursued with vigour.
There's a couple of ways that we're measuring that. One is on some very high-level long-term KPIs that we've got some metrics being developed around, and that's being measured by external parties. So all of the stakeholders have got an interest in making sure we grow our economy, and we're measuring the progress we're making on that. So that's at a very high level. At a lower level, each of the projects that we have got business plans that go before the Grow Dunedin Partnership. None of the funding is allocated without a business case being worked up, and within that business case there's obviously costings, but KPI is part of that, and the accountability is there around the Grow Dunedin Partnership, but also with the reference groups that are being established. There is some accountability around that table as well. So we've got multiple layers without trying to over-govern, but I think all of the stakeholders, and I can say my board, have an equal interest in ensuring that the contribution the Chamber makes, and I'm sure the other partners are the same, are measuring their results in terms of the input that they're putting in either time or cash. So I think the model we're establishing is evolving quite well and providing some really good KPIs and hopefully some good reporting back to the funders and stakeholders and the community ultimately.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. When the steering group was rebranded as the Grow Dunedin Partnership, I don't know if anyone foretold that the shorthand became rather confusing when the economic development strategy talks about GDP, and that becomes somewhat confusing. With regards to the reallocated budget of 123,200, it isn't immediately clear to me as to how that's going to two projects, but it isn't immediately clear as to how much going to each of those projects.
Based on the assumption I made there is that you would be looking at around about the same as last year for one of the better things, the sexy summer jobs.
Which was what? Sorry.
That was roughly 60,000, I think, last year. That's a line by line. That comes before council every year through the annual plan process. There was the other one is. Oops. Sorry, Councillor Hawkins, I got that wrong, sorry. The surplus is basically, the allocation, I see it as the business incubation budget.
Oh no, sorry, you misunderstand me. How's it being spent, the breakdown between the digital office and the business internship program? How's that 123,000 allocated between those two projects separately?
They'll put in an application to the Grow Dunedin Partnerships, so that'll be decided through that Grow Dunedin Partnership process.
As per the normal mechanism for doing things, if people have got a project they can take it to the Grow Dunedin Partnership.
How much was the business internship program in the 13-14 year?
It was 60,000.
Right. Okay. Because the issue I have, and this is around accountability as well, and it's not necessarily questioning you say that people question the scope of the digital office's vision or that of the digital strategy, but it's more about reporting and accountability to me. And we've had them come to us asking for $100,000 and we're asked to compare that against civic grant applications that have a far more thorough reporting mechanism, both financially and with regards to council's broader strategic objectives. The digital office don't have that, and now we're essentially being asked to approve their funding through projects for the EDS when they don't have the same KPIs and 12-month plan that all of the other projects do. And it's one thing to say they're doing great work, and I'm not questioning that, but it's hard for me to approve funding for something without knowing what that money is actually going to be spent on.
That's true, and that is one of the reasons why, if you're going back a month or two, that I've developed with them a service, if there is funding forthcoming, a service level agreement between the Digital Community Trust and Dunedin City Council. So there will be a mechanism in there that there'll be a far closer relationship and reporting mechanism and KPIs, etc. If it goes into the next stage of that funding round.
Who's had input into that SLA?
Myself, and also Digital Office, and I've had some staff look through it too.
And just the 70K for the Shanghai office, the money that we are spending on that project, and I'm assuming it's not the total budget of that, but what is that $70,000 being spent on?
At the moment, that's just a budget item. We're anticipating there would be a requirement for a contribution towards that, but at this stage, the first part of that program is to look at a feasibility around the office, what it would look like and what it will cost. Until that feasibility is done, at the moment, it's just a budget that we're anticipating could be something that we would go to the Grow Dunedin partnership with the business case for. If it isn't, then it will become an unspent item that will either be reallocated to other projects or will be left for council to have for carry forward or other activities. It's not committed money.
Right. And just lastly, on the digital office, Des, if they were to put in for over $50,000 of council funding, that would still have to come back for our approval through the Economic Development Committee. Is that right?
But yes, $50,000. Yes. And I thought I'd just pass this round. This is the day before yesterday, and Digital Office spoke about digital journeys, and ourselves, EDU with the chamber and Digital Office, we run a digital journeys session. There were 35 businesses there. And we're about to run another one, and the feedback from that has been exceptional. And that's I just thought I'd let you know that it's hot off the press. If you would like, I can email you all a copy. Would that be easier?
Councillor Vanders.
I've been a long-standing critic of the Economic Development Unit, Upstart and Sister City, because since 2004 I've seen hundreds of thousands go in budgets in all these directions, and I haven't seen any really tangible KPI that I believed was of a real benefit to the ratepayer. Now, I recognise that developing relationships and I think, as Councillor Staines has once said, economic development generally is a long-term game. But I've been what I would consider involved in a fairly long-term way, and I cannot see any real evidence for justifying most of the spending that's gone into these things. I'm wondering in the recommendations in 1A to D, why you would shave essentially your business incubator budget, your student entrepreneurship budget, and your other consultancy budget, why you would shave all of them off your own budgets to give them to the digital office Grow Dunedin Partnership Group, when you haven't yet seen any KPIs from these groups, when you haven't got any real evidence that you're going to see value for that, and why is it that you have been persuaded, or why is it that you've decided to cut your own budgets and give them to another group?
Through the chair, there has been significant things done with the economic development unit over the years. There's been a number of these things pitched through council over the years. There's been jobs created. Okay, there has also been jobs lost. For example, your hillsides and things like that. But economic development also, Councillor Vandervist, there's no magic bullet. There is a number of things that come together over time which build your base. And I see one of those as being a digital strategy, as an enabler, a major enabler in going forward into the future. And that is one of the reasons. I also see things around the student entrepreneurship budget. That has got a number of jobs, and if you look at the information which was put in the annual plan process around that, you'll find that that has been very, very successful. These are some of the things, these are some of the building blocks that build to that bigger picture. It's like a long distance runner. You're not there for 100 metres, you're not there for 3 years, it's a long-term approach.
So what you're saying then is that you have more confidence in this new digital office and Grow Dunedin partnership, for which you have really no evidence, than you have for your own business incubation, your own student entrepreneurship, and your other consultancy.
Councillor, that is...
I mean, you're moving the budget from those.
Councillor, that at the very least is a leading question. I don't expect the staff to answer that. You're making a statement, you're not asking a question. You can rephrase it, but that's...
Well, let me rephrase it then. Do you see the KPIs coming out of D as being significantly better than the KPIs from A, B and C, the budgets that you're cutting back?
There will be a number of... I have to look at things positively. I can't go in, and this to me is, Dunedin is a yes city. Dunedin is not a no city to me. That's what I must portray. One of the things, they will have their ups and downs. I know they will. All projects do. If you've been in that project arena, you will notice that things, they don't always go according to plan. Sometimes with project budgets, they go like this. And also with the projects itself alongside them. So what I'm saying, I see value on the evidence that I have to date and what is going on, and from feedback I've had, that these are things that we should continue on with, that will help build that level playing field and start moving things forward.
And can you summarise the value you see in D, in moving those budgets to D?
I think Des has answered that question.
I think all these contribute to the overall economic development strategy. And what I'm saying, for a wee bit more clarity, and in terms of measurement, and also treating everyone the same, that they come through that, they're all within that process of the economic development strategy as the umbrella. Because there's bits here and there's bits there. It's all about that umbrella approach to things. It's a more focused approach. It's bringing those things in which are already contributing to the economic development strategy, is bringing them in underneath the Grow Dunedin partnership.
Can I just make a comment too, from being one of the stakeholders for Grow Dunedin partnership and having been around economic development for approximately 20 years of my career. This is probably the first time that I've seen the city actually collectively getting together with a number of stakeholders with a common vision for the city to grow our economy. I've seen 20 years of economic decline, and I'm certainly passionate about turning that around. I don't know if there's a better model, councillor, than what we've got currently, which is to have major stakeholders all committed to a strategy that they've signed off and are committed to implementing. And, you know, I think that's a tremendous thing. If you look around the country, I don't know of any other city that has that approach currently. And it does require time. It does require us to put some measures around how we're looking at each of those projects, and I can tell you we're committed to ensuring that we are delivering practical returns for the city, but I think you have to give it a little bit of time. And it's not fair to be critical of past performance when we haven't had that model. I mean, the model that was in place prior to the strategy wasn't clearly working for anybody, which is why we've developed what we have. But I think you need to give it a little bit of time to prove itself, and we are seeing day to day good results from the work that's being done. And I for one know that we have measurable KPIs in there. Perhaps we need to get clearer in how we're portraying that to you and other councillors, because they are there and they are being ticked off daily.
Councillor Thompson.
Questions around two areas. Digital Office, I supported this, and I've been sitting on the fence on the proposal in this one. I could go either way. But I suppose what's led me to move from supporting it to sitting on the fence, sorry, this is a statement, but it's leading up to a question, is a feeling I have that it became a fund to a certain extent in search of something it could do, rather than working within its originally defined objectives. I don't mean that too unkindly, but that kind of how it feels when you start talking about the 30 laptops into a school or whatever. And I mean, it's laudable, but is it advancing Dunedin's digital future in any significant way? So I suppose what I'm looking for is, if we put this money in, some really clear, measurable objectives that I'm not sure yet that I see, and I need to see. So it's a challenge, I suppose. But what's your thought?
Thank you, councillor. Through the chair, I think you're right. I can understand where you're coming from and what your feelings and misgivings are. If anything, I think really, myself personally, to make the digital strategy really fly, it needs actually more funding, okay? But what I'll try to be in this case is relatively conservative, knowing the constraints that the city's under, and also, but at the same time, trying to lift that profile, and part of that, you are right, part of that is going to be around the key result areas, and I think if that's brought underneath the Grow Dunedin partnership, where it actually should be, it should not. I don't think it should stand out there by itself alone, where we've had little control, if you like. And I guess going forward, that's what I'm saying. It's going to be a bit of a moving feast till we get things moving in the right direction around the KPIs.
Well, part of my concern around the KPIs is around a very broad brush versus a very narrow, targeted set of objectives. And it seems to me that at the moment what we've got is a very broad brush approach. I am involved in e-commerce. My business has e-commerce. I know what it costs me to be there. It's about $250,000 a year. And so a broad brush approach to a whole lot of people is going to result in dealing with a lot of people for whom this is not economically a sensible place to be right now. But targeting people who are not there, who you feel could be and should be because they're either niche or specialist or whatever, which is a much more narrow objective, might actually result in a great deal more uptake. And so I'm worried about that wide brush and whether you've thought through those kinds of implications.
Yes, it may be that with less money, that they do concentrate more on the business aspect of things. This needs to be worked through. They have got a contract for the computers in homes, etc. But with limited resources, it may mean that the focus needs to change a wee bit.
Okay. Well, my second question, or second area of questioning, is around the Shanghai office, and I just state in advance that I'm definitely not opposed to that, but I'm acutely conscious that an office in search of a job is not where we want to be either. And several years ago, we did a similar kind of thing in Christchurch after the earthquake, and I was not in favour of it then, and I think it demonstrated that it was a position in search of a job. So how do we avoid that? What are the criteria that you guys have got in your head that would say there's a clear program of work that would determine the kind of person that we might need and when we might wish to start them?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The first bit of work we're going to do is to evaluate what type of office it is going to give us the best return. I've got some personal views around that, and I think one of the major sectors that we could benefit by having a presence in Shanghai would be around education. That needs to be scoped out, and when we talk about an office, our natural assumption is to think about people and resource that needs to be wrapped around that. We haven't come to a conclusion on that. My thinking could be that that is certainly an option, as is contracting. So it could be that we take a reasonably low risk approach to it. We also have a number of parties that are willing to support it, but we've just got to walk slowly down this path because we want to get it right.
Thank you.
Could you, perhaps John, and apropos that, just talk about the possibility of, you mentioned education, the possibility of actually generating a revenue stream through that, in answer to Councillor Thompson's question?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the best model we could get would be one that would be sustainable and sustainable in a way that it's funded by the parties that are going to benefit from it. So we would look to ensure that we capture the benefit that people are accruing by way of fees. So in the education sector, that can be done by commission, or it can be funded by institutions that are benefiting from it. We know we've got some interest from external parties, and we certainly have a lot of support from the government departments that we've talked to both here and in Shanghai. So we think we can get a model that's going to work. We will start it perhaps around one sector group and then look to expand it in other areas where we know there's demand and where it can self-fund. As to what it's going to look like, I wouldn't want to second guess that until we've done some feasibility work.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. Des, you said that the budgets that are being reallocated, these two projects, Digital Office and the Business Internship Program, will then have to put forward a case to the Grow Dunedin Partnership to be funded as a project. But that's not what this recommendation specifically says. It says that we will be reallocating them to those projects before it goes through that. So I wonder, just by way of amendment, foreshadowing that, I don't know how this works, but whether you'd be comfortable that that was amended to say that the three above sums amounting to 123,200 be held aside for the EDS contestable funding pool, so they can be judged against the merits of other things, say through the energy plan or any other of our strategic objectives.
I'd be quite happy with that. Quite happy.
Well, there's one more. Councillor McTavish, you had a question.
Well, just a couple of questions. Are we, Your Worship, dealing with both reports at the same time, or are we?
Yes.
We are, yeah. So the question that I have is just for you, Des, and it's around the connections with the internal strategy group. I'd like to understand how regularly that meets and what the processes by which you guys as a strategy group ensure the connections between the different strategies.
That might be a good question for Nicola, who runs that internal strategy group, actually.
I've got the information.
Through the chair, the strategy advisory group, so it brings together the managers of the leads for each of the key strategies, and we meet 6 6 weekly. Sorry, was there more than you want? I've just caught the tail end of the question.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm interested in is how it functionally works, in the sense that how do we ensure that any one project within, for example, the EDS is maximising the potential connections with other parts of other strategies? Because I can see a scenario where you guys meet once every 6 weeks and that's great, but I'm not sure how all of the detail, which is clearly going to be happening within this economic development strategy, is communicated to other strategy advisory group partners to ensure that those connections are maximised.
Okay, so at the moment it's relatively informal, and it happens just through each of those strategy leaders being in the room at the same time and updating the rest of the group on their strategy. So we rely on the strategy leaders to bring things to the table, if you like. But what we are working on over the next few months is looking at a comprehensive monitoring program. So looking at how we do monitor the implementation of each of these strategies and how they link together and complement each other. So at the moment it's happening informally, but we're working on a more formal process.
And just to assist with that, of course, in the economic development strategy case, council representatives, which in that case is me, sit on the economic development strategy or the Grow Dunedin Partnership Board, and part of that, the council responsibility on that board is to make sure that the broader suite of council requirements are being met through that implementation process.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor White.
Des, I see really these recommendations are really going to improve the growth of jobs in the under 30 market.
The job.
Growth jobs in the and retaining jobs for the under 30s and keeping them in the city.
Through the chair, it is hoped that through a number of these strategies, that we will be able to keep students in Dunedin who may have left. And if we look at basically the program we've got around 60 summer jobs, I think at the moment, just for the latest funding round, I think there's 11 full-time jobs being created out of that. And they're hoping in the not too distant future to move that to 15. So I am very that is a big area that's why we've got a number of these. As you know, as I alluded to before, it is with an economic development strategy. There are so many bricks in the wall. It's not a one-hit wonder. It's a matter of piecing everything together and trying to get the best value you possibly can out of the projects you're doing.
Okay, and another question in regards to the digital office or similar projects. Can you gauge the multiplier effect of, for every dollar the DCC puts in, we're getting 4 times the value based on the partnerships with others?
I'm sorry, I haven't done. I couldn't. It'd be just a shot in the dark if I tried to give you a multiplier.
Councillor Staines, you could.
My memory serves me well. The ratio is about 1 to 4, 1 to 5. So if you look at how the funding actually goes into the office, there's been $60,000, which basically supports the manager of the office and the operational costs of that office. That office then seeks funding, so it's received funding, quite large funding, from 2020 Trust and various other trusts, which give that gearing. So at the moment, I think it sits around about 1 to 4, 1 to 5 for every dollar of operational grant, the delivered project cost out the other end.
Councillor Kelly.
In view of Councillor Hawkins' motion that's about to arrive up there, I'm sure, would you be prepared to think of the digital office as not having a service level agreement in the meantime, but to wait until it can produce books like we would have usually had from other people asking us for money, and looking at what they're prepared to do and things, so as they account to us in a similar sort of way before doing a service level agreement, because a service level agreement seems to me to be the sort of thing you do to a, for want of a better description, monopoly supplier who's already been doing it for years and therefore is providing us. Once we go down that model, then we're committing ourselves to getting our digital services really from that supplier, whereas if they develop over a period suitable financial reporting, which quite frankly we've had very little of, would you be prepared to put that aside for a wee while and wait till we've done that when you're looking at them? Because then you can look at them, and when we ask you why you've chosen them as a useful place, you can say because of this.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think basically what would happen is they would, if we did just park up, if you like, the service level agreement at the moment, they would need to come through the Grow Dunedin partnership and outline really there the strengths of their case and their KPIs. Yes.
Just on the subject of accounts, the digital officer's accounts are being prepared by the accountant at the moment. I would hope that there would be a full set of audited accounts for the 13-14 year available prior to the end of June.
Right, Councillor Bezet.
Yeah, maybe a question for the CEO or perhaps Dennis, and it follows on from the question raised by Councillor McTavish that I didn't think was answered fully anyway. We have a structure at the moment that was a Grow Dunedin partnership. That's a group, that's overseeing group. We also have an advisory board, and we have some.
Each project, individual projects have advisory boards for the project within partners.
Ex-officio members like yourself, John, and Phil Kerr are on that, and you report to Grow Dunedin, or the Grow Dunedin partnership.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, so I'm looking at the reporting. So we have that, the Grow Dunedin partnership, we have that advisory board, we have those ex-officio members. How does all that information that they collate and the decisions they make get back to council? That was the question I think that Ginty was asking that wasn't...
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Bezet. I think what you're saying is absolutely correct, and what we've undertaken, which you'll find in the report, is that, I can't remember this, but once every Economic Development Committee meeting, there will be one external project and one internal project around the strategy reported on to council, to the Economic Development Committee.
Okay. Right, we've seemed to have exhausted the questions, and Councillor Lord, you indicated you'd move, and you're happy with the amendment that's been made, and Councillor Vandervis, you indicated you'd second. So that's moved, Councillor Lord, seconded Councillor Vandervis. That's the recommendations that are on the screen. I'll open up. Councillor Lord, would you like to say anything to kick off?
No, look, I'll wait for my right reply.
Righto. Councillor Benson-Pope.
I'm just wondering if the mover and seconder would be happy to delete the last two words at the end of the second line, the meaningless gibberish that doesn't add anything.
Yes.
Going forward, really, I have to say I give less credence to any motion that contains those words. Actually,
Can it say for 14, 15 and out years or something? Because otherwise it's a single year, is it just becomes permanent?
Ongoing, is that?
Yeah, what about going up? Going upwards, David?
Is there any discussion of an ungrammatical nature? Councillor Cow.
I just want to, if I may, if this is an appropriate time, to commend the Grow Dunedin sort of almost company, because it sort of, sometimes it says partner and sometimes it says stakeholders and sometimes it says joint somethings, but whatever they are, can we commend the city and the business community for getting together? I think this is a fabulous thing that it's doing, and it can only be a good thing to have the people who are making the money get together with the city and get on with it. So can we just say, and there's a lot of hard work been going on to get this model right, so thanks very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Bizet.
Yeah, I support this. This is just a further development of our economic development strategy. We've got a new strategy, and there's certainly been some changes made because of the different focus. We've got all these other groups now. In the past, we've been virtually on our own, just been the economic development unit. Now we've got real strength to our strategy, and I think while I appreciate the fact that some councils may be nervous about it, I think we've got a good reporting system in place there. I feel sorry for Des having to answer some of the questions because economic development is a sort of a nebulous thing. It's sort of like, you know, fighting smoke or something because the goalposts change so quickly. But I think with this group we are focusing on some real possibilities of growth within the city, and this fund will only assist to make that even better. So I certainly support it.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, I'm going to support it as well. And I think the main reason that I want to support it is, whilst I've got some reservations about spending in some areas, I think it's very much like what we've been doing with the warehouse district, where if you look at what council has actually put in terms of total dollars, it's not a huge amount of money, but if you look at what has been assisted by that, it's a great deal of change. And I think that for me it's about reinforcing that and providing some sort of sense of confidence to those employers in the city, particularly those employers who are working in that digital space, that the city understands that they could take their businesses tomorrow and take them anywhere in the world. They don't stay here for the temperature. And so for me, I look at, and I for example, Ian Taylor's letter yesterday I think probably sums that up in many respects, but there are people who are doing all sorts of amazing things out of this city, and they could do them probably more easily somewhere else. And so it may only be small amounts of money that we're putting in, but what it is doing is saying we believe in what you're doing, and to the extent that we're able, we want to be able to facilitate that and support it. So that message is actually as valuable as anything else for me, and is a significant part of why I support that. Having said that, of course I want to see actual measurables for this money and real outcomes, but the message is the really critical thing for me here.
Thank you.
Councillor Watt.
I'm definitely going to support this. The big thing that I see is really looking at EDUs working and these projects work, it really galvanises the business, the tourism, the education, and really right across the board, the whole community. Anything that creates jobs and opportunities and really attracts new minds to the city, but also helps us retain the under 30 market, I think is really, really important for us going forward.
Through the chair, it's just so important. It's just so important to me and economic development and business out there and the community that they know that council have got a wee bit of a stake in the game. It is really, really important. It just signifies that this council is interested in being behind the thing.
Any other speakers?
Bishop, I'm actually more interested in speaking to the next motion, because I'm assuming that we're going to do report 10A.
Now,
yeah, I appreciate it, but we've been taking the questions together, and it seems that a lot of people have been speaking rather broadly.
Being remiss in not realising that there was two sets of recommendations. All right, well, we'll take that one separately. I think we have to now. For my part, I support this motion. I think that what this demonstrates is a continuation of the refining of our economic development effort. I recall only 4 or 5 years ago, we had an industry project fund, and it was anything but refined. We just threw lumps of money at people and hoped that something would come of it, and I'd have to say that often very little did. What we've achieved with the economic development strategy and partnering up with the various stakeholders is not only a refinement, but giving, as Des just alluded, confidence to the business community that we are not only leveraging the resource or getting some synergies out of putting our resource together, but we're actually putting our efforts where our mouth is as well. And I think this not only sends it's a much more efficient way of doing it within council, but it sends the right message to the business community, particularly that we and we'd have to say that given that education is in there, it's not just the pure business community. So I think this is a really positive step in the refinement of our and efficiency of our economic development strategy. Councillor, do you want to exercise your right of reply?
Yeah, look, I'll just say I am supporting it, but I mean, questions were asked about KPIs, and Des has talked about a marathon. Now, I'm probably not as clever as some for giving speeches, but this isn't like the road cone budget where you spend $1,000 on $50 road cones and you get 20 of them or whatever it is. But what I think is dollars spent here are dollars that we don't always see tangible KPIs. My experience is 35 years ago when I left school, there was no internet, there was no fax machines, there was no cell phones, and I drifted into farming, and I'd go out at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd come back at 6 o'clock at night, and unfortunately the only company I'd have all day was Neil Collins. But times have changed, and now I can sit out in the tractor or sit out on the hill, and I can get absolute up-to-date share prices, prices of milk, reports on milk quality from the day before. And I realise that the internet, which I use on a very basic level, is far greater and far more useful than what I use. My kids can do things on the computer that I only dream about, and I sit there in awe of them and just read my book. And the one thing in this city, we talk about low wages, and we look at places like South Dunedin and Brockpool. And I actually think about those kids that get computers in low decile schools, and I think about some of those kids, and we might have the next Steve Jobs or the next Ronald Wayne or Bill Gates sitting right here in our city. And these sort of things might make the difference for some of those kids. And our future's not going to be, I used to, like I say, go out on the farm, for me, an investment in the future was, when I got a cab on my tractor and I didn't need to wear a raincoat to keep the cold out, or when you get a new chainsaw. But these sort of things, we're in a completely different world. Our kids' future's not going to be the same as ours. Winning a competition like Gigatown, that's a really great thing if it happens. But it doesn't mean the money's wasted if we don't win it. And the reality of it is, it's only going to be a matter of time, and we are going to have ultra-fast broadband. If we can get 1 gig broadband, that's incredible. But if we can't, but what happens when we get kids in schools in low decile areas, when we get kids developing what's going to be, because it's a funny thing, but I do a bit of work with different kids, and often I see the most cunning and clever kids come out of the most difficult circumstances. So I think anything we can do, it's not like road cones. I don't get filled with regret when some of this money appears to go into a hole, because I don't think it is just going into a hole. I think it's a vital spend, and it's just like in farming. We spend money on things, sometimes things don't turn out to be winners, or they don't turn out to be good investments, but we still need to have a crack. And I'm very confident that this money is actually a winner, but we just can't always measure it like we can the road cone budget, which Councillor Benson Pope's so fond of. But I am absolutely in support. I wish it was more.
All right, thank you. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we will move on to the report 10A, which is the Grow Dunedin Partnership update. And I'll open it up to any questions on this specifically. Now I know I said, and maybe there are none because I said we'd take them all together, but if anyone has any specific question on this? And if not, would someone like to move this? Councillor Wiley, any questions? Councillor Wiley, moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lord, discussion?
Well, just briefly wish, it's just because I thought it was more appropriate for me to speak to this particular motion than that one. And that's because I just want to highlight, I think for me what's most important, I commend the work that's happened to date to establish a more transparent framework, and I think it goes a long way to doing that. Clearly there's still some work to be done establishing advisory groups and putting names to those and that sort of thing, and I'm sure the next update will have that. But I'm much more comfortable with this than I have been with any of the previous iterations, and it feels like a real step forward. And I thank the partnership for that. In terms of what I wanted to highlight was just those links with the other strategies. And I appreciate these and Nicola that that's a work in progress, and that there is some progress happening in that regard. But for me, it's just as critical as having all the links with the partners is ensuring that all of our strategies are working cohesively, and I think, you know, the things like the digital office, the student entrepreneurship work, I think John has highlighted the Shanghai cultural connections, and Councillor Wilson was talking about that this morning. All of that is just as critical in ensuring that those are working well as the work which is effectively EDS internal. I think that the responsibility is on us as a council to ensure that's right, because we are the ones that hold the keys, as it were, to those other strategies, and it's a piece of internal clockwork that needs to be well polished and well tuned. But I think as well it would be helpful if there was some mechanism to ensure that all the partners, I don't know, Des, through the work that you do, providing that connection so that all of the partners are aware of the potential connections through those advisory groups, so that we do maximise positive outcomes. As much as I hear Councillor Thompson's comments around the digital office in terms of ensuring that the outcomes are strongly focused on what will actually work for business, I think that the work that it's been doing previously has bridged that space between what works for community and what works for business, and I think it would be really sad if we lost some of that by it moving in under a strongly focused economic development strategy umbrella. So yeah, I think I've probably hammered my point too much, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing that particular element of connection develop.
Further speakers? Councillor Wiley, do you want to speak to it? While we have a right to start or apply, either way.
I think that the Grow Dunedin Partnership is absolutely brilliant. I think we need to openly thank and acknowledge our partners in the Grow Dunedin Partnership consistently. You know, this is not just us, this is the partnership of Ngā Tahu, the Otago Chamber of Commerce, the Polytech, the Southland Employers Association, Otago Southland Employers Association, the University of Otago. We have to consistently say, this is a partnership, and we need to really be an active and a leader in this partnership.
Okay, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Des. Thank you, John. Now, councillors. We'll move on to development contributions, which is item 14. And the supplementary report that we received last night subsequent to the select committee deliberations, or whatever they were. Welcome, team.
Morning.
So we're on to, now I guess, just for clarification, given that we have the report, which is item 14, and we have the revised report, and I'm just trying to find it. No, any changes to your recommendations? It would be good to, if you have any changes to your recommendations, it would be good to spell those out.
Through the Chair, rather than changes to the recommendations, I think it might be useful if Bill just steps you through the kind of the 4 issues that we want to address this morning, and Susie will answer any questions.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship. So we have 2 recommendations in the report, and they stand. And then we have 2 changes that we're proposing to make, fairly minor, I've got to say, as a result, set out in the memorandum.
Yes.
And in the memorandum, there are 2 recommendations written down. One is that you accept all of that, and 2, that as amended, you agree to adopt the policy on the 23rd of June. Have I helped or hindered with that explanation?
No, I apologise, I wasn't listening as well as I could have, but the recommendations that are on item report on 14 stand.
That's correct.
And you've got some slight additions.
Yep, some essentially wording changes to the policy as a result of changes recommended by the relevant Parliamentary Select Committee to the bill. So we apologise that this had to be done as a late report, effectively, but unfortunately we only got the Select Committee's report on Monday.
Right.
The good news is, though, that very little needs to change in the policy as a result of those recommendations.
So do you just want to go through each of those changes and then...
Certainly. So the first change that we're recommending is in the report, and that's that we clarify some wording around how the policy would impact on farm developments. And I think you heard a submission from the Farmers Federation in which they indicated that they were happy with the policy intent. Secondly, we are proposing that we retain the reconsideration provisions that were included in the draft policy. And then we move on to the memorandum, in which we were proposing to delete the references to objections, to an objection process that currently exists in the draft policy, because it's clear from the Select Committee report that process will be addressed by legislation. So we will, instead of basically replicating the legislation in the policy, just refer people to the legislation itself. And finally, there are some very, very minor changes to the wording that's, again, replicated in the policy around private development agreements. So we're just seeking to copy those across as well.
Okay.
That's it.
So the recommendations will be, as I understand it, the first 2 that are already there, and the third one, which you're asking us to approve the policy as amended. Correct. Right. Questions? Councillor, just going to move. You're happy to move, Councillor? I'll just hold that until we've seen if there's any questions. Is there any questions of staff on this one?
I've got one question, and it's just before the mover and second, because I'd like to. I'm curious. I asked a question about the $5,000 cap that we have on activity classes in various different areas of benefit. It just strikes me that when we don't put in a CPI adjustment on capped figures, it invariably causes us nightmares in subsequent years, because a $5,000 cap in 2013 is not a $5,000 cap in 2023, and I wondered whether there is any merit in that approach. Now, you've given an answer which says that council could consider it effectively.
Okay, I'm happy to expand on that. You could do it as a fixed indexation, if you like, within the policy, and it would be calculated each year, and the number would escalate. Or you could do it at each annual review of the policy, because in effect we do review this policy every year. At the very least, it reflects actual CapEx CapEx expenditures and changes to forecast capital expenditures. So there is, if you like, an automatic opportunity every year for you to review whether the cap is what you want. But I guess what we've balanced through the policy development process is that the cap was adopted at a point in time, we presume, to address those submissions that were concerned about affordability.
Yeah.
And so in thinking about whether or not you want to adopt indexation, I think you need to reconsider the question, what were we trying to achieve originally with the cap?
And I guess the reason why I flagged it is because I appreciate that the figures will be reworked every year to ensure that they're right, but the $5,000 cap, as I understand it, is something that we put into the body of the text of the policy rather than it being a figure that would necessarily be rehashed every year. So that's why I'm flagging it up, just for consideration. I mean, ultimately, if you're adding CPI to a cap every year, it's not increasing the relative cost of the component. It's simply ensuring that that remains static in real terms. So, that's why I'm flagging it.
And then it's a question of whether you want to do that now, given how far down the track we are on consultation, or next year, I think.
That's fine, and I'm comfortable with us reconsidering it next year if staff are comfortable that we can do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Councillor Wilson.
Oh, just taking that point further, I'm not sure. I think what we also need to inform ourselves is which CPI we'd use, because a straight CPI rather than the local government index, which I think is now available, I think there's a bigger discussion than doing it right now. So I wouldn't want to be doing it on CPI, I know that.
Councillor Banks.
On 14.3, there's reference to the Otago Property Investors Association. I was wondering, first of all, if the Mayor is still a member, if you're a member of the Otago Property Investors.
I don't think I am.
Okay, good.
I obviously haven't paid the bill. I can't recall paying the bill, so I don't think I am. No.
Good, excellent. I was wondering that the last sentence in that paragraph says the transfer of credits could be considered by the council on a case-by-case basis. That sort of leaves the door very much open regarding whether they would be if someone applied. Do you mean it to mean that if somebody wants to have their credits transferred between properties that you would? Or that if someone applies to have their credits transferred between properties that you might think about it?
Through the Chair, we've thought about the question of transferability, and it presents extraordinary administrative difficulties. But in effect, the same thing could be achieved, for example, through a remission, if council was of the view, and it would be council that made this decision.
Yeah, I understand that. That's all clear.
Right.
What isn't clear is whether you would, given an application to transfer, whether you would do it, or whether you, as it says here, could consider. Could consider sounds very high and mighty, and you just might and you just might not.
Well, through your worship, I regret the wording if it gives that impression. But absolutely,
you would consider
would be considered.
Great.
And the policy is actually clearer than the report in that respect. If someone seeks a remission, it will be considered.
Okay, great. So we can just change that to would. Sure. I think that'll keep someone a bit happier. Thank you.
Well, now just let's be clear. We can't change the report. But what I think Bill has just said is that the policy is clearer than the report, so probably no need. I mean, the motion, we can't change the report now. We're not, because it's been written, and in any case, the recommendations aren't about the report, are they? They're about the policy.
We're sitting back from here. I might be a member of something or another. I'm sure I haven't really asked the question on.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it's your call, Councillor, whether you do. But I would have thought, and I note that Councillor Hall has sat back. But I would have thought that the development contributions subject would mean that people who are developers would feel a conflict, possibly. but I don't think that necessarily investors would necessarily feel a conflict, just because...
I just don't want to be accused of being something or another.
Or indeed any potential house purchaser or tenant could feel because their costs may be increased as a result of this. So I really think it's that wide.
Anyway, any further questions?
Yeah, just on this issue, when you talk about council with the capital C in that paragraph, you were talking about a staff decision to consider or not, or something that comes back to this table as happens occasionally around exceptions?
Through your worship, the presumption is that it goes to council. That's what the policy says, but it could ultimately be a question of delegation if council was of that view.
Thank you. That's good.
Further questions? Okay. It's been moved by Councillor Benson-Pope. Did you second it, Councillor Wilson? Right. Moved Councillor Benson-Pope, seconded Councillor Wilson. Is there any... Would you like to speak?
Well, just briefly, I think this is a really good example, and this is an issue that's come into fruition after a lot of work over some considerable time. It is rather unusual for the council to be making such a significant change in terms of its fee structure, and it has been well consulted on and apparently welcomed by most parts of the community. And I think there is a general acknowledgement that this is a positive policy, and there's very good reason for it. In fact, in terms of the infrastructural demands that councils face, I hope they're not further compromised by other legislative change that make things more difficult for us around providing services for the community.
Councillor McTavish.
Yeah, just briefly, Your Worship, I also welcome the final adoption of this. It's been a long time coming in a long road. Just in relation to the credits, transfer of credits issue, I have nervousness around that from a planning perspective, and I think any process which considers that needs to really involve the planning team very closely. I'm happy with recommendations because it doesn't make any changes to that area, so looking at on that basis.
Councillor Banks.
It's with some regret that I feel we've come to this place with development contributions. In the early discussions that I had with the previous chief executive orders on how we filled the enormous debt hole that we have, he said to me in his delightful Welsh accent, which I won't even try to imitate, that it seems to be madness to have such a level of debt and not to be charging significant development contributions. And when I was first involved with development contributions discussions, going back some years now, with more than half of the councillors that are here now, not there, different councillors in those days, a number of them property developers, I might add. We had a start point where what we would do was we would charge 100% of what was available, and then look at trying to encourage the kinds of developments we wanted under the spatial plan and the district plan by reducing from that 100%, and that actually gave us potentially quite a large development contributions income, and B, it gave us some quite really strong levers to be able to promote or otherwise certain kinds of development, be they heritage or be they whatever. Very strange things happened when the 100% development contributions level was struck or was agreed to as a beginning point. The main thing that happened was that it went on the back burner for quite a few months, and then when it came up quite a few months later, and I'd asked about it a number of times, it came up and then it was then again deferred for want of further information, and years went by until the government came along and decided that actually some of the things that all the councils, or most of the councils around the country, had been raising as development contributions weren't actually legal anyway. We've now got to a stage after successive and progressive reduction in the level of development contributions where we are seeing a development contributions policy being ticked off that most people seem happy with, especially the developers, which I don't believe, as a ratepayers representative, can be a good thing. I believe that the powerful and wealthy submitters to the process and the legal and even governmental attacks on it have put us in a position where we will continue to subsidise, the ratepayers will continue to subsidise the kinds of subdivisions, the kinds of developments which in many cases I don't think are really ideal for the city, especially in terms of the spatial plan. The only reason I don't have any real concerns about ticking this off is that Dunedin doesn't have a lot of growth anyway. There aren't going to be great numbers of development contributions in the foreseeable future, and therefore this watered down policy actually doesn't have a lot of bottom line effect anyway. So on that basis I'm grudgingly able to vote for it.
There's a discussion. Councillor Benson-Pope, do you wish to exercise your right of reply? So I'm going to put it, and just for the record, the two recommendations on page 14.1 have been joined by another, which is that Council approve the policy as amended. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Subsequent motion, Your Worship. And it's unusual, this is an unusual time to do this, but I'd just like to thank not only the staff, but all of the submitters who have helped us get to this point, and to the hours that the councillors have put into this, my colleagues and some have put a lot more than I have into it. I think this has come as a really good result after a really long process, and I want to note it as an exceptional consultation process with the community, and they put in substantial time and effort with their lawyers as well, which has been a really collegial process, and I want to note that formally, please, as a resolution of thanks.
Second, Councillor Staines. Discussion on that? Put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 27. Right, councillors, we have a quorum, so we will resume. We're on to landfill charges, which is item. Well, anyway, you've got a memo in front of you. So perhaps it would be good, Ian, welcome. Do you want to just, since this has just been dropped on us, and I don't mean that disparagingly, but do you want to just explain the implications of this? Oh, welcome, Laurie. Didn't see you there.
Right, I'll see how I go. We looked back through the numbers again and tried to simplify it and put a table with the various scenarios together. So we've got 4 scenarios, 2 on consulted fees with and without the weighbridge, and 2 on the increased fees with and without the weighbridge. And then financial guys have looked through the reduced, because of the reduced waste, the reduced expenditure, and then we've compared that on the very bottom line there with the change in cash flow from the draft budget for the various options. So as Grant alluded to yesterday, the $467,000 reduction that I had alluded to in the report worked out, when you've gone right through all the other numbers, was slightly lower. So these are the most updated numbers. And what we've also factored in is the loss of the business from one of those big customers in the last few months. So this is information up to the end of April. So we've got 10 months worth of data to base this on. So then on the second page, I've also put in there the table that I prepared earlier in the year, comparing our landfill fees with other councils around the country. I've ordered them highest at the top down to the lowest at the bottom, and obviously highlighted Green Island where we are at the moment. So for putting our fees up, we were only going to be still around the middle of the pack, so to speak, not knowing what these other councils are possibly doing with their fees and charges. So that's why I just put the 130 in there to see where we are at the moment. So I looked at some options there of either keeping the current fees and absorbing the losses in solid waste. So obviously those, and that depends whether there's the weighbridge or not, or increasing the fees to reduce the shortfall, or keeping the consultant fees and increasing rates by what Grant said, about 0.25%, or if we try to recover that lost tonnage, it works out about 8,000 tonnes of general waste and about 800 tonnes of mixed waste. I mean, and that figure can sort of be mixed and matched because those are the sort of the two big income streams that come into the landfill.
Okay. Shall I just open it up for questions then and get some, so Councillor McTavish.
Thank you. Just wondering whether you guys had a look at what Fairfield's charges were.
They're currently about the same as ours at the current level.
At current levels.
So I don't know, and I don't know what they're doing next year.
Okay, thank you.
They're fine.
Councillor Woods.
Just wondering, you've got the options. I presume that option 1 does not preclude option 4?
No, I mean those were just some thoughts there for discussion and.
Yeah, under any of the options, there is potential reduction in, I suppose, the cash flow from what's budgeted. If you decide that the fees shouldn't be put up because they weren't included in the draft annual plan, then scenario 1 or 2 would apply. If you feel that there is a basis for increasing the fees, then obviously scenario 3 or 4, and obviously the difference, well, not obvious, but the difference in the loss between the two is that with the weighbridge, the smaller domestic users would end up paying less than if we had the fee schedule, because it favours.
So in simplistic form, what you really need from us are potentially 3 resolutions. And I'm thinking how easy for us to work for is one is that something like we set the fees as per the consultation document and vote on that, and then set whether we install the weighbridge, because they're quite different and have to be separate motions, I presume.
Yes, so in terms of the report that you've got in front of you on page 18.1, the first resolution was about increasing the fees. So if you didn't pass that, then the fees would be as set in the annual plan.
Or anyone else can move, yeah, okay. I'm happy to move when it suits.
Okay.
Just for the purposes of having the debate.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Not as per the paper, but as I suggested it, I would.
Oh, that's fine. I'm happy about that. We'll just get through the questions and then come back to you. Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Worship. Historically, and I think it was when Suki Turner was mayor, so it's very historically.
Sorry?
I was just saying, historically, we did have a policy to import waste from beyond our boundaries. And the last discussion we had was when Suki Turner was mayor, so it is a very historic policy. So I'm just wondering whether that policy is still implemented from time to time, or does it still exist? Because my understanding is we've never actually revisited it, certainly in my time, but...
Just to clarify, the policy is that we don't allow...
Well, I'm just wondering whether A, whether we still have that policy, and B, do we still implement it by way of bringing waste in from outside? Just thinking about trying to make these numbers work, is that a possibility?
My understanding of that was that when the resource recovery waste management strategy was developed in 2006, we had in there that there was we accepted waste from outside the district so long as there was waste minimisation activities going on in their district.
So there is that opportunity that still exists. Okay.
And yes, we have taken waste in from outside the district.
Thank you.
Okay, can I just follow up on that? I mean, that obviously relates to the fourth option on the second page of your memo. Can you give us an idea of what the practicalities are? Do you go out and bid for other people's waste, or how does it work? Or how might that work?
Well, that really brings in the commercial model where we would go out and get contracts with waste collection companies to bring their waste to the city. We currently don't hold any waste collection contracts with any contractor to bring their waste to our landfill. It's all just whether they come or not.
And if you were to try and attract, under option 4, if you were to try and attract, would that mean that we would be expending any money to incentivise them to bring, or to just offer them a lower price to bring it from, because presumably there's a cost in bringing it from a distance anyway?
Well, that would be probably part of the negotiations with the various players out there.
In the past, I'm aware that we've been approached by commercial companies collecting refuse seeking a discounted rate at Green Island, and it's been a competition between landfills in a sense, and we've resisted as much as we can that. And so there is a competitive market out there between ourselves, the other landfill, but also cartage to other landfills out of the city.
Yeah. Councillor Lord.
2 questions. One is, it probably sounds like a silly question, but I just don't quite understand how you get a shortfall. Like when I see option 4, find another 8,000 tonnes. I mean, if we have a waste minimisation strategy, do our costs not relate to what we process? So, for example, if you process so many cubic metres or so many tonnes of rubbish, if you have a shortfall next year because there's less come in, should your costs not just go down to the same tune? I mean, shouldn't it really, once you get above a certain level, be very, your costs just vary up and down. And the other sort of question I had was, well, it's perhaps a wee statement I was going to say, perhaps it's a question for the Chief. Can we, as a council, because we've, I know Councillor Wilson was talking about yesterday, we've consulted on different charges to these, does that mean we cannot actually raise the higher charge? Because the other thing is, if I'm sort of happy enough to put fees up if that's where they have to go, but I'm just...
I would suggest that it's not a practice you'd want to get into widely, but under the Local Government Act you can in fact change the fees and charges for a council at any time during the year. So it wouldn't be good practice, but it is acceptable to not impose the fees that you've just consulted on.
The other half?
There is, probably answers been I can, but there is a variable cost. There's a fixed cost we pay for keeping the gates open at the landfill, and then there's a variable cost which is based on the tonnage that comes in. So as the tonnage reduces, our variable costs also decrease, but it's not a one-for-one.
Councillor Cole.
Just because I haven't got my head round our strategy, I understood our strategy documents to say something like our aspiration is zero waste to landfill or something. I'm wondering whether we can just say zero of our own waste, but we're prepared to import waste. Is that something we can do under our current strategy, that importing waste is a good plan, or is it? I just sort of imagined that when it said zero waste to landfill or something, that meant everybody's, but maybe technically it sort of doesn't and we're happy to import it.
I think the zero waste to landfill is a nationwide term that's used all around the country. It's what you would call an aspirational goal. The intent of that is to talk about reducing people's waste. So don't throw things away when you can reuse them. Don't throw things away when you can recycle them. So across the entire country, you're wanting to reduce the culture of just disposing of things, basically. Disposing of things to landfill when in fact they've got other perfectly good uses, or don't buy things that you know you're going to throw away 3 weeks later. If everybody did that amount of work, there is still a certain amount of waste to landfill, and which landfill that goes to in one sense is immaterial. The intent isn't to say, well, we could easily do zero waste Dunedin City Council by simply shipping all of our waste to Oamaru. That wouldn't be achieving the intent of the policy. The intent of the zero waste idea is to, as a country, as a planet, reduce waste.
So what does that mean? We could be, within our strategy, the landfill capital of New Zealand?
I think there's, and I'd ask the Chief to comment on this, I think there's a statutory requirement to have a waste minimisation effort.
Yeah,
there is.
Yeah, under Waste Minimisation Act 2008, all councils have to have a waste minimisation waste management minimisation plan.
Well, and there are two components to that, and one is pertaining to reducing waste, and the other is pertaining to minimising the harmful effects of waste. And I think it's arguable when we have an unlined landfill and we're pumping an enormous amount of waste into it and it's on the edge of an estuary, that is ultimately going to have effects.
Councillor Thompson.
With regard to the option 4, it sounds to me that chasing that revenue is not something that as a department you have much experience in, because it's not something that we've done.
Correct.
So from a commercial perspective, do you have any sense of what the variables might be that are manipulatable to to possibly bring that lost contractor back or move another contractor over? Or is it, I mean, do you have any sense of what the market is? Or
I think the market's very price driven. So potentially we get people moving from our landfill to the competitors because of a better price when it comes down to it. And we're not well set up in that competitive market with a department that runs the landfill under contract. That's one of the issues for us. And it is an issue around the competing and somewhat conflicting requirements of owning a landfill and being around waste minimisation as well. We're not well set up. I think though that whatever option is chosen, we will need to manage the landfill to reduce the potential gap between what's currently in the budget and the position we might end up with. But that's the case for most of our activities where the revenues fall short. So we need to reduce our expenditure, look at our capital program, look at if there are ways of maximising revenue. There's a suite of things that can be done, I think.
So, as I recall, in the past we have, well, like last year, current financial year I should say, we adjusted some rates, I think, because we were facing a hole in our budget. That's correct, isn't it?
That was last financial year.
Last financial year.
Yep.
But it was done during the year. It wasn't done as part of the annual plan process. It was, as I recall,
it was separate.
It was separate, yeah.
Yep.
So if we were to say that, taking the Chief's comment about it not being desirable to change a rate that or set a rate that's different to what we've gone out and consulted on, do we have the ability to give staff a month or two to engage around whether or not some of that lost commercial revenue can be retrieved, in which case all well and good, or if not, then come back and say, well, we will need to look at these fees.
The problem with doing it that way last year was that it was later in the year, and by the time it took to get the decision process through, we only had the higher fees from March. I think it was March? May. Yeah, I think it was May. So we only had 3 months, so we'd basically missed the boat. So
sure.
The purpose of raising it now, this year, was to say, hey, look, let's get in the right position at the beginning of the year so that we're not losing and there's no chance of catching it up next year.
Well, my question, I guess, is more around whether or not the commercial issues are able to be addressed successfully or unsuccessfully relatively quickly, so that if we set the rate as proposed in the annual plan and we're unable to fill that hole, no pun intended, then we're early enough in the year that we could look at the fees.
Well, once you set the fees, imagine we'll have an ongoing conversation with various potential people who bring refuse to the landfill. It's an ongoing issue. Maybe we need to make sure we report back earlier in the financial year around how the budget's looking, in terms of whether we're still looking at, depending on what your decision is, the sort of deficit from our budget that we're looking at, and then review it at that time, say in 3 months' time or 4 months' time. Because if one of our the parties that was bringing rubbish to our landfill is moved to someone else, typically that might be because they've got a better longer-term contract with another party.
So it may not be possible to change that.
They don't, yeah, and that's where some of the discussions on where have been in the past. Sort of a longer-term frame with a reduced cost.
Well, the final question is, given that the competitor landfill is around where we are at the moment in terms of, well, rack rates anyway, then how big a risk do you see it that we would lose additional commercial revenue, given it seems we don't have contracts, if we move even to the suggested levels, let alone increase them further?
That would depend whether they move their rates up or not. I mean, it's a chicken and egg.
I would note that in terms of the consulted on rates, they were the same as in the existing year, so $130 as I read in the table. The only difference is the introduction of the mixed load. So if you stick with the consulted on tonnage rates, that's the same as currently applies.
Yes, but what I'm hearing is that it's likely to result in higher rates on average for the commercial users relative to the domestic users. That, if I got that wrong?
No, the
rate cost, not rates, I mean.
No, it won't change the cost to commercial users. The issue is that if we bring in the weighbridge for domestic users, the contribution drops.
Yeah, they're already being weighed, right?
Yeah.
They're already charged.
Councillor Peake.
Yeah, I think there's certainly inherent tensions in these figures and how we conduct the business of landfill in a responsible way, consistent with our strategy. I'm out of concern that increasing the fees might further, could further lose us quite a substantial custom. I'm just wondering, and you've got the shortfalls in terms of the budget, but in terms of the tonnages, you talk about 7,000 tonnes shortfall, another shortfall, kind of shortfall for this year, down to 43,000. Yeah, I mean, have you worked out tonnages when you've done the sums here in terms of budget?
Yes, we've taken the 10 months this year and we've extrapolated, and then I've compared the customer that we lost, what their tonnage was in the previous years on 6 monthly and 4 monthly, to verify that model, and it matches up, so that the shortfall is what we say it's going to be, the 7,000 tonnes.
Okay, and just in the proposed increase in terms of green waste to $100, do you have any feel for how that the market might react to that in terms of the domestic market anyway, let alone the?
Well, that for the proposed new charges.
Yeah.
That's for a full load of green waste, so there's no waste in it at all. So that will all be totally diverted, so they won't be going to the transfer station or the tip face. So it's just for a whole green load waste. Green waste load, sorry.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Worship. Just want to follow up on the answer that Mr Avery gave about the potential deficit, and just trying to understand if whatever we adopt, there's a chance there will be an ongoing deficit, or it may go up and down depending on the big clients, whether they can go or whatever. When you talk about rejigging the budget, are you talking just in solid waste, or are you talking waste services, water and waste, solid waste? Because I'm just trying to understand, because the contractor, we've got a long-term contract, well, actually, in fact it's short-term at the moment, which must absorb a big chunk of what's committed financially. So how much flexibility is left in the solid waste budget is really my question. Or is it the water and waste budget where you would consider rejigging to make the numbers stack up?
It would really only be in the solid waste budget overall. We'd have a nervousness, I think, about getting into a situation where we're effectively cross-subsidising between those various departments for landfill operations. We've worked pretty hard over the last probably 5 to 10 years to get the solid waste and landfill budgets so that they are transparent around their costs. So it would be within more the solid waste budget overall.
So can I follow that up with a question, particularly with our waste minimisation commitments? What impact, if any, if we chose scenario 1 with the weighbridge, that the 350k deficit could impact on our waste minimisation programs and commitments that we've already got?
Most of the waste minimisation commitments is funded from the waste levy, so it won't have any impact on the waste minimisation strategy.
I think we're trying to manage it I think the aim would be certainly the focus would be on managing it within the landfill budgets, which is a part of the solid waste budgets overall. Again, trying to avoid the situation where we're cross-subsidising or funding activities out of different areas. It would be better, I think, in terms of landfill budgets to show that there's a clear up or down compared to the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you. Would it not be possible to develop, in a strategic sense, that it's an argument that it's an advantage actually, that not from the revenue side, but it's an advantage that these volumes have gone elsewhere for whatever reason because of the consequences in terms of prolonging the life of our landfill?
It was certainly in terms of the life of the landfill, we've got consents to 2023. As I understand it, based on current filling rates, we won't have reached our consent limits, so we'll have spare space now. That raises the bigger question of what do we do post 2023, which is a whole different, and we need to come back during this financial year and try and resolve that, because this is what happens after 2023 and the future of the DCC ownership of a landfill or management of a landfill. But if there was, if we had consents that went beyond 2023, then there is certainly value in the residual space that's there.
Well, sorry, can I just tease that out? The reason I ask is because I'm aware of situations, as we all will be, I guess, elsewhere in the country, where people are exporting waste because they were unable to get consents locally to fill whatever valley it was. And so I just think that it's important to have this conversation in terms of that wider strategic issue that will be well to talk about picking up revenue by picking up someone else's waste, but there'll be a very good reason why they can't dispose of it themselves at whatever volume.
Yeah, and certainly the waste, the disposal marketable world, I suppose, in this part of the South Island has changed over time. You've now got Class A landfills at Victoria Flats up in Queenstown and at AB Line down south. There's a number of landfills around the place, Mount Cooey at Cluth, which I believe they'll be able to continue to use. Waitaki is running out of space throughout the market at the moment with requests for proposals around what they might do with their waste. Over the last probably 10 years, there's been discussions between neighbouring local authorities about the future of waste management in terms of landfilling and whether there should be another Class A landfill located somewhere around us somewhere. There's been quite a bit of work done around that, and it's certainly a bit of work we'll continue to bring back to the council this year to try and work through.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thanks, Your Worship. Mine's a similar question, I guess. Do we have any understanding of the relative capacities of competitor landfills in that long-term strategic sense?
No, we don't. Our figures get publicly published. We supply them to the ORC and to the government, Ministry for the Environment, through the Waste Levy reporting system. The government Ministry for the Environment will only report back on a national level, and the Regional Council will not report on the Otago or Dunedin position as to those tonnages. So I don't know how much waste or capacity there is.
But your question was around current lives of...
Yeah, how much room do they have relative to how much room do we have?
Difficult to answer that, but Victoria Flats or Victoria Bridge, as I understand, consented beyond Green Island. AB Lime, it's coming out of a lime works, and they're actually digging the hole faster than putting rubbish in. Clutha, in terms of Mount Kui, have got spare capacity, they believe, in whether they apply for additional consents to extend their life. Waitaki's out of space, they're out in the market at the moment. Central Otago take their waste currently to Victoria Bridge, or Victoria Flats, because they've got a contractual arrangement to do that. We have our competitor in terms of Dunedin, unsure of the life of that. We think it's limited, but we're not entirely sure.
Thanks.
Councillor Calvert.
Hearing what the Chief said, both about the general undesirability of doing things that weren't quite what we consulted on, and also that we can change fees during the year, is it a feasible or useful option in your view to choose one of the consulted options, preferably the one that has least effect on us, namely the without the weighbridge one, and asking for further information? I mean, I really appreciate that you've got a whole lot together in a very short space of time, but there's a whole lot of things we don't know that might be useful. Asking for a report over the next, say, 3 months or something, because if it turns out that we've got a principled position to change the consulted weighbridge figures once we know everything, then it would be a different decision. Would it make sense if we knew more about competitors and the likelihood long-term thing? I mean, it may be that the general budget, for example, is never going to be achieved at the rate it was before without charging people much more than we're ever going to get. You know, the tipping point about whether they go to someone else or not. That would be useful things to know, and we can do them. Could we feasibly, with more information in 6 months' time or 3 months?
Well, I certainly think that in 3 months' time we'll have more information about how we're currently tracking, or how we ended up in terms of our current year's budget, and using that to project forward, we'll have more, better information on that. I'd suggest that, irrespective of your decision, that we commit to reporting, in 3 months, 4 months' time anyway on this particular budget, because whatever decision you make, I think we need to report back about how, particularly in this budget, given the discussion, it's tracking, and provide that information then.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. I guess I'm just trying to get my head around this. The biggest customer, or one of the big customers that have been lost, is Tahuna with the sludge?
No, this is an external customer.
Okay.
Just to be clear, the budgets were recut to reflect the change in the Tahuna sludge. So that's all taken account of in terms of the overall position, I suppose.
Councillor Thompson.
I just want to be sure I'm understanding the financial figures here in this memorandum. Can you just confirm for me the scenario 1, second column and third column, the difference in change in cash flow, has that got anything to do with the cost of the weighbridge? Right, so that's not there.
Operating revenues and expenditures.
Okay, that's reassuring, thank you.
No further questions? Councillor Wilson, you indicated you had something to move.
I think that's up there. Chris has also worked on it, so he may want to move it, and I'll second his motion. He's done most of the work.
Well, I'm easy, as long as we... Right, there it is. So I'll just give everyone a section of 2 to...
Should be budgeted rather than budged in the second line. We'll put that down to Jenny.
Clearly a spelling mistake for Councillor Staines.
Okay. Councillor, either Councillor Staines or Councillor Wilson can speak to this initially, which... Councillor Staines.
In selecting these resolutions, I think it takes a middle ground at the start. So I'm not convinced that the costs of the weighbridge for domestic customers is in fact going to be the best way forwards. We have consulted on a set of charges, and we've had the feedback from that. So I think there is no reason why we should not propose to adopt those new fees. I think the greater issue for us is contained in the third resolution, which is that we do have a waste minimisation plan. We are trying to reduce the tonnage to landfill. Therefore, we have an ongoing issue if we base our costs on a fixed set of operational costs with revenues that are falling. That penalises those people who do have items that have no choice but take them to landfill on the basis that we are doing a lot of work to reduce all of the other items that shouldn't be. And so I think we've got to take a very serious look at the operational costs on the assumption that we are being more successful in reducing the tonnage going to the landfill operation. I know we had a comment made to us that the costs of the landfill are fixed, but I don't necessarily believe that all of the costs at the landfill are fixed costs, and we should be trying to reduce those variable costs as much as we can to match the kind of tonnage that we are expecting. Fourth resolution is really there to say we want to know what's being done both internally within the DCC and with the contract that we have with Delta to reduce that negative cash flow and put us into a position where we can better cope with a situation where there is a reducing demand in terms of waste to landfill.
Can I, before I come to the next speaker, can I just clarify, maybe there's something I'm missing, but number 1 talks about scenario 2, which as I see it on the second page of the memorandum is increase the fees.
Yep, as consulted on.
Consultant fees for that.
Yeah. Yep.
Right, okay. It's got Councillor Kelp.
Just in 2, because I really like where the whole thing's going, but what we heard, I think earlier, was that there was the ability to absorb 150,000 to install a second weighbridge. So I'm presuming, no, earlier we heard that we could pay for a second weighbridge for 150,000 earlier in the year when this conversation started, and that could be absorbed and work delayed out, however what was going to be paid for. So that figure in there should really be 150, not 110, because 150 is what it was proposed could be absorbed within that. So presumably that's what's Yeah.
what's proposed in the annual plan.
No, the 150 was in the annual plan. The Weybridge was 150 in the annual plan.
So that should be
150, yep.
Councillor Thompson.
Oh, 3 points. I take the point with regard to the fact that we've got a time limit on our tip, but I'm not sure that we should be averse. At the end of the day, whether we fill our hole or Fairfield Tip's hole, it's the same estuary, and it's just where the money's going. And so, whilst I'm not an advocate of going out and looking to increase the volumes going into there because of lifespan, over and above what we had originally planned, I am an advocate of at least trying to maintain our commercial customers, and I think we should be doing what we can. So I don't think we should be afraid of filling the hole at the same rate as we plan to fill it, especially as it's only going to be going into a different part of the hole. Secondly, I just remind councillors that we've just got to be careful that what we're trying to take with the left hand, we're not also taking with the right hand. To the extent that we negotiate with Delta to reduce costs, we potentially reduce the dividend or the ability to fund the dividend that comes back to us on the other hand. So I think we've just got to be a little bit mindful of that. And thirdly, with the leave of the mover and seconder, I would be much more comfortable if number 4 had something like 3 months in it rather than 6 months. I think that the primary area around, there's 2 primary areas that staff are going to need to be looking at. One is whether there is some cost that can be taken out, and the second is around securing potentially some additional commercial revenue. I believe if they're not in a position to tell us about either of those things in 3 months, then there's something wrong. I perfectly accept that they could tell us in 3 months that they are in negotiations and that, or whatever, but 6 months is too long.
I'm happy for it to be 3 months.
Yep.
Just checking with that.
Yeah.
You're quite comfortable with that check? Right, okay. Okay, are there any other? Councillor New.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of comments. The question I asked about bringing in waste externally beyond the city's boundaries, the reality of it is that it occurs from time to time, regardless of whether staff go out and pursue it. Because I know the reality is, if you take the Palmerston scenario, the landfill is closed. So what do people do who can't get rid of their rubbish on a weekly basis in the domestic collection? They drive down the road a few k's and go to the Waikawati landfill. So that it does occur, and I'm sure it probably occurs from the south as well. But I think you just need to accept that does happen. So I'm not suggesting that we should be actively attracting large customers into the Green Island landfill to help boost revenue, but we may be approached from time to time. That's just the reality of it. In terms of number 3, I suppose just posing the question with regards to, how much influence can we have over a council-controlled organisation that has a contract with us to deliver a certain service. So I'm just not sure, and perhaps Councillor Staines will elaborate, but I'm just not sure how much of an influence we can have, full stop. I support the raising of the charges, which I assume will be the 130 for general waste and 80 for green waste, and for a mixed load 115. I support those. I'm disappointed we can't. 110, sorry, 110, beg your pardon, for mixed load. I'm concerned that we're not addressing the issue about the sort of the fairness and equity of our residential customers, for which essentially was this, when this debate started, was about fairness about 6 months ago, leading into this annual plan. So I know we've got to deal with a deficit, I accept that, and we've given that priority, but I think we need to convey the message that to our customers is that, it will be considered as soon as we can afford to implement that, because I think we mustn't lose sight of that, because at the moment I don't think it's appropriate that staff are put in, or the contracted staff are put in a position that they've got to make a judgment call, which makes it difficult for them to implement. And I think there are a lot of people out there that are dissatisfied and will continue to be dissatisfied until we actually have a weighbridge installed.
Councillor Wilson.
I'm going to support this, obviously, but I want to just talk to the issue that Councillor Noon talked about, and one of the almost additions to this motion was that we have to undertake some communication with the ratepayer. There are several aspects of landfills and waste and recycling that I don't think we do particularly well. That's probably our fault for not resourcing this department correctly, but and with other changes that are happening, I'm hopeful that we can pick up on some of that messaging a lot better, and in fact that in itself may have some solutions that we haven't really investigated to date that may be much more cost effective than purchasing expensive infrastructure. So I think sitting alongside there is a comms piece that doesn't need to be voted on, but we need to be doing and messaging much better with the whole of Dunedin.
Councillor McTavish.
Thank you, Worship. I really struggle to support this. I think I'm going to, because I can't see another short-term way of dealing with the situation. And I acknowledge the issue that Councillor Thompson spoke to in relation to the ultimately fairly silly situation that we find ourselves in, where we're competing in a race to the bottom environmentally with someone else on the other side of the estuary. In terms of, and I think it's probably the case that it's better for that waste to be going into a publicly owned facility which has some environmental concern around it than a commercial operation. So I will support this motion. However, I am concerned about the suggestion, and maybe it wasn't a suggestion, that we might go out and actively seek customers for the landfill from outside of the district. I think that it does run counter to, if it doesn't run counter to our own waste management minimisation plan, I imagine that it certainly would run counter to the waste management minimisation plans of the districts that we were trying to seek that custom from. So I don't think that that's the best outcome in terms of, from a national perspective, from an environmental perspective, and I think we have a responsibility to think larger than our own bottom line in that regard. I do think, however, that there are two pieces of work that I'd really like to see progressed as a matter of urgency through ISCOM, and the first of those is conversations with government around product stewardship, because ultimately, until the government takes some responsibility for promoting product stewardship initiatives, local governments around the country are going to be fundamentally on the back foot when it comes to dealing with resource issues and waste streams. And the government to date has signalled that they are not willing to look at anything over and above voluntary product stewardship, and frankly that's not working and it's not enough. And that all that does is impose costs for ratepayers in the long term, as we have to pick up responsibility that should sit with the producer. The second piece of work is around future waste infrastructure here in Dunedin, and that's been on the radar since I arrived on council, and I appreciate that it's a really complex piece of work, and I think we around this table haven't given that enough emphasis. And I'd like to see us moving forward on that, and I know that is on the staff agenda to press forward on. I'd almost like to see a fifth part of the motion that notes that we will be progressing discussions around future waste infrastructure as a matter of urgency in the 2014-15 year, because I think that what we're seeing here is just the thin edge of the wedge, and it's not going to get any easier in terms of operating landfill. It's not going to get any cheaper, probably going to get more expensive, and we need to be thinking beyond landfill as a solution for undivertible waste.
Councillor Law.
I have a problem too. It's a different one to Ginty. The problem I have with... I've got lots of different problems. Ask my psychiatrist. No, the problem I have, I had originally been against the idea of building a weighbridge, but the more I think about it, I think about averages and just the very nature of working out averages. Half the people pay too much and half the people get off a bit of a discount. And I had thought, it come around to the thinking that that would be a very, very good way of alerting the people that have been getting away with not paying enough to find out the true value of their costs. And to be quite honest, if you had a thing where everybody paid exactly what they deserve to pay according to the charges set, that might be in itself a positive thing to get the people thinking about minimising their waste. And I just actually had come to that. So by having option 2 there, I feel a wee bit uncomfortable. So I just I thought it was a way, and I know it's a lot of money, but 110 it was that we would be spending. You could still have 40 to offset, so I would actually still be in the position now. I'd like to see a weighbridge used effectively so people knew that they couldn't argue with the guy at the booth, they couldn't send letters to the editor, they'd actually be responsible for their own waste, so to speak.
Well, I'm going to support this. Going back to Councillor Noon's comment that started with concerns about fairness, I think that's true up to a point, but really the bottom line is that the perception is that it costs too much to get rid of your rubbish. That's the message that keeps coming through, and I think it's an inherited attitude of almost of a sense of entitlement that if stuff's not worth anything, why should it cost you money to dispose of it? Ignoring the stark fact that increasingly waste disposal is a very, very expensive issue. So, a very expensive process, and not likely to get any better, as several speakers have mentioned. So, putting in a weighbridge, which I kind of favoured in terms of fairness, doesn't address anything about that. It doesn't address the cost of running a landfill. We were still going to, it would distribute the costs to various users, but it's not going to change the fundamentals of the problem we have, which is we're trying to reduce the amount of waste, and the only way we can make a landfill work is to increase the amount of waste, which is essentially the conundrum we're in. So I support this, but I also support what Councillor Wilson mentioned about, and I don't know how successful we'll be, but about basically informing our ratepayers that it costs money to get rid of waste, and it costs a lot of money to get rid of waste. And so clearly the best ultimate solution for everyone is to reduce it to as little as possible. So that's why I'll be supporting this. Councillor Wiley, done? Okay. Councillor Staples. Yes, right reply. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. Just briefly, I can support 3 and 4, but I can't support 1 or 2 for reasons that Councillor Lord's done an admirable job of articulating already, and the Mayor picked up on as well. And the point that public perception doesn't match the true cost of dealing with this problem doesn't mean that we should then ignore the true cost of this problem, or at least absorb that gulf between the public perception and the true cost, which is essentially what we've been doing and will probably continue to do under this as proposed. So for that reason, I can't support it. And secondly, I always find it difficult supporting anything that favours guessing over measuring, because we essentially have an interpretive set of fees and charges which will continue under this, as opposed to measuring and attributing the costs according to that measurement. So I would like these to be taken separately. Thank you.
Councillor States.
I don't disagree with Councillor Hawkins' comments, and I personally feel somewhat let down by the changes in information that occurred here, that in a way have caused us to have to perhaps go in a direction that we would otherwise not have gone. But it seems to me that we can't afford to have the size of negative cash flow that has been indicated. And we equally, I don't think, can afford to increase our charges even further because of the fact that we have less tonnage going into our landfill. The reality of life is that we are working towards reducing the amount of waste to landfill, and that will reduce the revenues associated with the landfill. So there are a number of issues here that we need to deal with. I would be more than happy to support a weighbridge at the point that we have got our landfill costs lined up a bit. That will then overcome the issue in question of fairness on some loads. But that $150,000 takes away over half of the negative cash flow that we're seeing. And my expectation of staff is that we will find the rest by taking a very close look at all of the costs associated with operating the landfill and with our waste activities. So I would urge councillors to support this, even though it may not be the ideal solution as a result of the information that came to us late.
All right, as requested, Councillor Wiley.
Sorry, can I ask the mover and the second if there's a possibility to modify?
Well, it's actually too late now because the last speaker spoke.
Just a point of clarification, Your Worship, I did highlight when I spoke with regards to my concern about number 3, and I wanted to understand whether we can influence a contractor who has got a service to provide. And I think they're on a yearly contract, but for us to be able to influence them to create some surpluses to offset the deficit. I'm just trying to understand whether that's actually possible.
Well, I would have thought that if it's not, the approach will wiggle that out. The point is, if we approach them and if they say, well, we've got a contract and we're going to stick to it, then that answers the question.
Until next year.
Yeah.
It may not help them when they come to have their contract reviewed.
That's not an
Right, I'm going to put this now. I'm going to put 1. All those in favour of 1, please say aye. Aye. Against? Aye. Could I have a show of hands on that one, please? All those in favour of 1, please raise their hand.
Division.
Sorry, division on this.
Councillor Benson Pope. No. Councillor Bezette. Oh, he's not here. Councillor Calvert. Yes. Aye. Councillor Hall. Are you withdrawn? Councillor Hawkins.
No.
Councillor Lord.
No.
Councillor McTavish. No. Sorry.
No.
Councillor Noon.
Aye.
Councillor Peat.
Aye.
Councillor Staines.
Aye.
Councillor Thompson.
Aye.
Councillor Vander's not here. Councillor Wiley.
No.
Councillor Wilson.
Aye.
Mayor Cull.
Aye.
Motion carried 575.
Right. All those, now, since I'm having taken them separately and there's been one division asked for it, is it your intention to ask all on division? So we'll just do them all by division.
Councillor Benson Pope.
No.
Councillor Calvert. Aye. Councillor Hawkins.
No.
Councillor Lord.
No.
Councillor McTavish.
No.
Councillor Noon.
Aye.
Councillor Peat.
Aye.
Councillor Staines.
Aye.
Councillor Thompson.
Aye.
Councillor Wiley.
No.
Councillor Wilson.
Aye.
Mayor Cull.
Aye.
Motion carried 7-5.
This is on to number 3.
Councillor Benson Pope.
No.
Councillor Calvert.
Aye.
Councillor Hawkins.
Aye.
Councillor Lord.
Aye.
Councillor McTavish.
Aye.
Councillor Noon.
No.
Councillor Peake.
Aye.
Councillor Staines.
Aye.
Councillor Thompson.
Aye.
Councillor Wiley.
Aye.
Councillor Wilson. Aye. Mayor Cole.
Aye.
Motion carried 10-2. I've got one more.
Don't need to speak. I don't want to be
All right. I will put this one. This is number 4. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. That's but that's landfill. There's one remaining.
Portobello Road.
Yes. So we move on to the Portobello Road, Harrington Point conundrum. Councillor Thompson.
Could, I know that staff are going to report back, but could I signal a slightly revised motion to the one that I put the other day, that I think it might be helpful to have on the board at the beginning of the process rather than later in the process?
Right, okay. Well, take that on board. What I suggest we do then is just ask have quick staff bring us any extra information that they have and we'll questions, but then I'll come back to you, Councillor Thompson, with a basis for discussion as much as anything. Thanks. Right.
I'll update in terms of the question around NZTA funding. From a regional land transport submission basis, the council should put forward its preferred program, be that an accelerated or extended program. That's the process that we should go through. So once the program that's been decided on by the council, that goes forward into the regional land transport program, and then through to the national land transport program is considered. So it will be subject to how much money is available in each bucket.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Wilson.
Just to add another complexity, because this morning, which I presume you're aware, we've signed off on the development contributions policy, and should this project now have a growth component added to it and some consideration given to that?
Pass. I'm not sure whether, I don't think there's been an explicit consideration of that. It is a road improvement project, obviously, for safety reasons. How much of that is growth related, I'm not sure we've sat down and really worked through. If a portion is growth related.
However, can I say there's a piece of work to do now, to sit down and do those calculations. Bear in mind that development contributions are received and then offset retrospectively, so we're not pre-planning for development contributions. So we get them in, and at the end of the year we then pay off the appropriate debt in the appropriate places. The ongoing saving to council is then through lower debt. So in that sense, looking into the future but not forward, you don't have to adjust your budgets. You won't be adjusting your budgets accordingly.
But can I just jump in there and clarify? I think the question that Councillor Wilson is asking is a portion of what we are doing on Portobello Road, Harrington Point Road, allowing for future growth or future extra use anywhere. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, it just says some bearing, because what we're discussing here is absolutely fine as a layout, but what we actually haven't consulted on with any clarity is the apportionment of the costs. In fact, and I'm concerned that we go down a path of giving an indication that we've sorted out the layout, but actually we then get a whole lot of people saying, well, that's absolutely fine, you go ahead with that, but why are we paying so much? And I'm not, so there's two chances to this. We've had a wonderful year of passionate submitters telling us the order it should be done in. I'm not sure that people understand the cost to the project.
well, that will come out of whatever we decide. And so that's the first thing. It's consequential on what we decide, but secondly, I'm not sure that we can even address it in this year's budget. It remains to be seen whether it's relevant to this year's budget.
Okay.
Councillor McTavish, did you have?
I was just going to make clarification that if there is a growth component that has been calculated associated with this project, it would have been included in the 20-year bracket, which has identified this year's development contribution cost. However, you're right that it may not have been calculated.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Worship. My question is just around the state of the seawall. If you consider the various components of the upgrade.
Can you bring your...
Oh, sorry. My question is around the state of the seawall. If you look at the components that make up the improvement of the total Portobello Road, Harrington Point, excluding, I suppose, the one we're already committed to, which is the Otakau Harrington Point section. But if we look at the other sections that we're programming in whatever sequence that may be decided in this discussion, which of those sections has the greatest need for the seawall replacement? Might be a question for Evan.
Just the section on the coloured plan that Councillor Noon alluded to is section D. It's from Lower Portobello to Harwood is clearly the worst section. We are addressing that from our renewals budgets, so it's outside of the capital funding, and it will be done in parallel with other works. Differentiating between section A and C, the Vauxhall to Glenfalloch, the seawall is quite sound in relative terms. Section C, Broad Bay to Portobello, the seawall is generally in a slightly worse state of repair. It's certainly not critical, but if I was to pick, it would be Broad Bay to Portobello as being the worst of the two.
Any further questions? Okay. Councillor Thompson, have you given Jenny the...
Yes, I have.
Could you put Jenny... So basically this is this is what you're proposing to move.
Yes.
And for the purposes of discussion, is there a seconder? Yeah. Councillor Benson Pope, second. Right. So for the purposes of the discussion, this has been moved and seconded, and I'll invite Councillor Thompson to explain it.
Well, when I moved the motion on the first day of deliberations, it was with the intention of giving staff the time to work on this, and the Chief indicated it might be possible to get some information prior to that. It was clearly not, and I think we need to recognise that there are negotiations that have to take place where we've been given further information as to how we might have to approach NZTA with regard to any changes. And so this revised motion recognises that as well. I think that one of the things that's become clear to me is that regardless of whether you believe that the Vauxhall to Glenfalloch or the Broad Bay to Portobello is the higher priority, and quite clearly based on the submitters it's pretty evenly split, there's a slight weighting one way or the other, there's a validity to both cases, and I think that that would be the view of most councillors sitting around the table. And so for me, time is needed to resolve the questions. I've already alluded to the NZTA issue. There is time needed to look at the funding models. And I think there's also time needed to discuss with contractors around potential changes, because that may well feed back into the cost mix as well, doing this in a different time frame. This motion effectively, I acknowledge, leaves it as a live issue. And that is unfortunate. It would be better if we could have a clearly resolved approach. It essentially says that the status quo is still in place, but we're looking to bring the Vauxhall to Glenfelix section forward if we possibly can. In the event that staff come back to us during the year and say, based on the work we've done around the following areas, we believe that's possible, it largely disappears as a live issue. To the extent that they come back and tell us we've done the work and it's not possible, then it is going to remain a live issue. But it always was going to, because we're not doing any of the work in the 14-15 year. We would only be, apart from the Harwardian, but we were going to be commencing it in 15-16. It would therefore be in the 15-16 LTP. It would be out for consultation. Regardless of whether we made a decision to stick with the status quo or change the order right here and now, it would be the funding around that decision would be sitting in the 15-16 LTP, and we would potentially be putting everybody through the same stress and everything that we've been through. So what this does do is give us an opportunity to do the work now, and in the event it is possible, then I think it removes that whole issue. If it's not possible, well then I freely acknowledge that we will have another Donnybrook in 12 months' time. So my view is we could sit here and have a debate right now about which way around, but even if we were to have that debate and come to a firm decision, it would still be live for argument in the next annual plan round. So this gives us, in my view, the best chance of coming to a resolution that's clear and doesn't whip away the current status quo position. That is my view.
All the other stuff, does somebody move it out on the table and then before we move forward? Well, we've already got a motion on the table, so we can't really accept that to withdraw them on the table. Sorry.
Just process pick up, which we will now resolve. I cannot accept this motion until we uplift the one that was laid on the table. So,
you happy to nominate me to do that? I'd be happy.
Yes, so moved Councillor Lord, seconded Councillor Peake, that we uplift the motion that is already on the table. And who moved that?
It was Thompson Staines.
And you are happy to withdraw that? Oh no, we've got to move that. All those in favour of uplifting it, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
I wish to withdraw the motion.
And you were happy with that? Right, so that's withdrawn. Now I can formally...
That's right, now we can just accept. Right. Yeah, now we're a start.
So now we're back where we were.
Well, I finished what I had to say.
So, you finished what you had to say? Yes. Thank you. Right, so we're in discussion now. This is the motion on the in front of us at the moment, and the next speaker is Councillor Calvert.
Just to question whether we need a C which asks the staff to, because I'm not sure how this works, ask the staff to formally put it in something so as that when we're put it in a proposal so as that before the annual plan, at the long-term plan deliberations, we will know NZTA's response and how much they will contribute to it. Can we, I don't know how technically, but could we put C, not just look into it and things, but can we put C, asking for it to be sort of put in as a...
Is the question to the staff on that resolution, if we do it this way, is there certainty of what will go into the regional land transport plan? Or do we need to set a priority just in case the funding can't be done by both? Or can that may assist you?
Hang on, we've got two questions being asked here by two different people, and let's address the first one. I would have thought, Councillor Calvert, that what you're suggesting is implicit in A, because if for instance NZTA can't come to the party with funding, then it won't be able to be configured. That'll be one of the variables, but I may be wrong.
I don't know whether we have to not just ask them whether they're likely to, whether we actually formally have to say we're proposing or considering proposing to do that.
In order to be able to report back to the council, we will need to have had intense discussions with NZTA and confirm what it is that we may or may not want to do. Evan's just pointed out that we've got to have something in for the regional land transport program around about August, I understand. So by August we need to have sorted out whether we can speed it up and how we'd fund that and what the NZTA contribution would be. That's all implicit as part of that. There'd be no point coming back to you saying, well, we think we've got a cunning plan, but we're not sure what the NZTA view is. Yes.
And can I just clarify, the reason this is worded the way it is it doesn't remove anything from what's already been implicit. I mean, it's leaving the status quo essentially in place.
That one would, certainly. And Jean's pointed out to me also that even getting it into the RLTP for that process in August, the decision doesn't come out until May. In terms of confirming that, yeah. So there will be some uncertainties, but that's the nature of what we're talking about now. It does tie into the, as I understand, the 3-year cycle though, the 15-16. And there are a number of things that we need to do for that, including things like passenger transport and our entire program that needs to fit in that as well. So,
right. Now, as we move forward, I'm conscious that given the somewhat innovative nature of the motion, that there may be questions. So I will treat some things as questions and allow people to speak. And Councillor Calvert, I took that as a question, so you may wish to return to this for this discussion. And I'm not trying to encourage anyone to do the opposite of what they normally do and couch questions as statements, but there may well be clarification sorts. Councillor Peake.
Thank you. Just in terms of the considerations that the staff will look at, could they look at the possibility of the main fill for the road widening to come from quarries that are at the outer end of the peninsula, either existing ones or new ones, that might offset the cost of transporting material that far?
We can't.
This week operational.
As Councillor Thompson pointed out, that there'll be a need for some engagement with contractors on this. So having early discussions with contractors will help identify whether there's opportunities around different sources.
Councillor Wiley.
Well, I'm going to support this because one of the key issues that we discussed the other day was the truck movements. If we went ahead with the Portobello to Broad Bay, there was going to be 23,000 truck movements coming through from the city out to fill the hole. So following what Councillor Peake just said, yeah, really looking at the opportunities that were out on the peninsula to use material rather than carting it all the way from the city, and hopefully speeding up the process to do it.
Councillor McTavish, did you want to speak now? Or?
Well, I'm genuinely supportive, and I thank Councillor Thompson for the effort he's put into this. The only question or comment that I would have isn't with regards to the word completed in A. The reason why I flag that is because I understand the Broad Bay to Portobello works would take a shorter period than the Vauxhall to Glenfalloch works. If they are to be completed at the same time, that essentially means that Vauxhall to Glenfalloch would begin...
Commenced.
Undertaken.
Yeah, I thought it probably wasn't, but I just wanted to flag that.
Thank you.
Sorry, just in response to that, it's either completed or commenced. There are similar timeframes. If you look at, and even perhaps comment, looking at the sheet, Vauxhall to Glenfalloch was estimated to cost 8.4 million as an indicator of the amount of work, and the Broad Bay to Portobello was estimated to cost 8 million, which is an indicator of the, for the non-technical people,
Misinformed. I Otherwise.
But one of the things that, if you pass this resolution, we would like to, we would include is looking at how we might do that and having two effectively work sites on the road open at the same time in two different locations, as opposed to one larger work site at one spot followed by a larger work site at the other spot, may give a better overall outcome. That would be part of how we'd report back. So the timeframes might still be the same, but it might be better to consolidate all the efforts for a shorter period of time in one bit and then consolidate all the efforts on the other bit rather than trying to have two being done at the same time. The timeframes will still be the same, but we'd include that in the report back as well.
Okay, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is about before construction begins, and in order for these works to be undertaken at or around the same time, they would need to be ready to go at or around the same time. Do we have the capacity, or can we look into having the capacity to have that design work being done simultaneously so that becomes an option?
Yes, and as part of the work to be completed over the next few months and including some engagement with contractors, we will be looking at different ways or methods that we can roll it out quicker, and that could potentially include design build type arrangements in terms of with contractors. We'll be certainly considering ways at which we can speed up that design process.
Councillor Lord.
Yeah, look, my question's for the mover and the second. I like the wording of the motion, but in view of the number of submissions we've had this year, and we've had a huge amount, I'm a pacifist by nature, and I'll fight anyone that says I'm not, but I wonder if we should acknowledge that, I don't know how you say it, I'm not that clever, but maybe in view of the number of submissions, council asks staff to report to, in view of the number of submissions to council, we ask staff to report or prepare a report, just so we don't get to the stage next year where we have 550 more people commenting on it. If you like we well and truly know the sentiment of all the people involved.
My intention was to try and enable us to make a decision based on staff's advice as far in advance of the next annual plan round as we could, because to the extent that if it's possible, that removes the angst. Okay, and if it's not possible, well, we'd be in my view, we'd be better debating that in the light of all of the submissions that we've had and the knowledge that we've gained from that, and making a decision. And as I said in my opening comments, I acknowledge that doesn't stop it becoming a live issue at the next annual plan round, because that's just the nature of things.
Okay. Yep. Councillor Wilson.
I'm going to support this, but it comes with some concerns. And first of all, just mentioning the gravel, I think that's pretty like Saddle Hill, and I don't think it's something that we can deal with in governance, because I don't think NZTA would buy into it necessarily, albeit it may give us some savings. The two nervousnesses I have is the expectations that this may come in at a wee bit more expensive, and we'll want to just share the cost as we continue to do. I will be foreshadowing that I want a motion at the roundup for this, that things that we consider projects like this, where we have had, in answer to my very many and tedious questions to the submitters, an appetite to consider a greater contribution from the area most affected, and I would like to have that visited at some stage for the long-term plan. And I know it sets a precedent, but I think it's something that we should be looking at for fairness and equity. So I'm going to foreshadow that at some stage today I'll be moving a motion along that line, but I don't want to do it specifically to this project itself. The other nervousness I have is that we are building in, as we design these things, an innate stranded cost in knowing that we're going to build to a different design at the end. And in fact, the recent resealing at past Broad Bay has shown that there is a design fault, and we know we're not going to build to that design, and yet we're continuing on that design in the interim. And what I would like to do is to foreshadow after this a motion that we build to the final design now, even though it's going to cause some inconsistency as we go along, but we build that now into any future works, including E. Because there is no point building what is not a good design. In fact, in the new ceiling work out there, it is quite clear that people were crossing at every turn the corners because they don't realise those cycleways. People were parking over them thinking it was a good car park. But car parking space, there is no knowledge that it is a cycleway. And I know it's going to be really hard for the next wee while when we go through here, having that inconsistent design, but there's no point putting stranded costs into something that's going to cost us substantially. So I'm foreshadowing that will be a subsequent motion.
Councillor Hall.
In the design of the two sections, can we make sure we take into account if the filler's going to be taken from the Portobello end, we do the Portobello section first, and if it's going to come from Dunedin, we do the Vauxhall section first? Because that way the road is going to be safer for the heavy vehicles travelling either way.
Do you want to comment on that, Chair?
Look, I think, as I mentioned before, going through an engagement with contractors, get an understanding of how they might approach this, that will become clearer and that could be a consideration. But I think it would be premature to make a decision at this point in time around that.
Further speakers? Councillor Noon.
In some respects, I was delighted not to be here the other day to go through the agony, so I apologise for asking the question about the seawall, because that may have been covered then, so my apologies. I can certainly live with the recommendations, and I think the key thing here is we're sending a message to the community that A, we've listened, and B, I think we're also asking them to help us on the way by lobbying the Regional Land Transport Program when that time comes, because clearly around this table I can't recall anyone over the years arguing against the upgrade of the Portobello Harrington Point roads, remembering it's rebuilding the seawall, it's widening the carriageway, it's creating the cycleway. I mean, it's a project that's always been well supported, so I think it would be useful if our community could help us on the way by, you know, showing up at the Regional Land Transport Program, submitting and voicing their concerns, because that's going to be a pretty critical process to make these resolutions happen.
Councillor Peet.
Thank you, and I think we're in debate at this time.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
Mike.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we are in debate. I was going to have quite a lot to say here this morning and go in, excuse me, Councillor Lord, but with guns blazing to give priority to Section C, Broad Bay, Portobello. And I do feel that the presence not only physically of a few community members from Broad Bay, but also the community board, the two schools, Otako, Runanga, and Portobello Inc., which is the Residents Association, that put in pretty strong submissions. Just give a bit of context for this. This is the #1 tourist road in Dunedin. As far as I'm concerned, it is. It feeds an industry estimated to be worth $100 million in economic activity to Dunedin. That is the ecotourism industry, the bulk of which you find from Broad Bay out to the Taiaroa Head. So that's the context for it. It is also happens to be the most challenging road. Any of us who've driven down the State Highway 1 from either direction and onto Portobello Road would know just suddenly they have to sit up and take notice. This is quite challenging. Narrow in places, winding, and so on. Above all, it is a safety kind of issue that I have to talk about, though. The safety for all road users is of paramount concern. It overrides efficiency of flows or even recreational opportunities. And in that light, I have some new information, and I have to thank Sean Hogan, who's with us today, for producing this it's the latest, and I wondered whether we, at risk of overloading us again with a bit more information, but if we had, you would see what I'm talking about. It is the most complete and the most current information on the two sections that are going to be for debate
at some stage anyway. I won't take too much time, Your Honour, because I think we will have this debate again probably a bit later. But here, and I think the staff, there'll be enough for the staff as well. Just looking at safety, and it's an amazing sort of revelation in some of these things, because it talks not only about injury accidents, which are pretty similar for both the Section C and Section A. Broad Bay, Portobello slightly ahead with the injury ones, but no, there's nothing much in it. The social cost, you see, I'm looking at the top left-hand set of stats there, talks about social cost, and we know these are figures that come out of an assessment of the cost of hospitalisation or work loss, hours lost and so on. 6.6 million for the Portobello Broad Bay section, and just on 5 million for Section C. Just looking at, I was interested too at the serious injuries. The figures we've had from Evan and Ron Minimer, I think, have been varying around a little bit. But in this one we see the serious injury accidents at 8 for the Broad Bay Portobello, and 5 for the area, which is the precise area, talking Burns Point to Rosehill Road, not Glenfelloc entrance, which is already covered. So we've got from Rosehill Road, we've got some widening already has happened there. So if you look at those serious injury, or just even the injury accidents, and you look at the traffic flows, the traffic volumes, you can start putting a multiplying factor on the risks that you take when you drive Broad Bay Portobello. You can be up as high as 3 times the risk factor. And so, you know, that's, you know, to me, quite a serious thing. The other thing is that the overseas driver content of those flows between Broad Bay and Portobello increases. It's up at 20% of the accidents, and suggests, as you might imagine, that the traffic coming out at McAndrew Bay and Company Bay still includes our overseas visitors. So, okay, I've just kind of set a little scene in terms of the risk. I'll just mention the windiness. There are 16 blind corners between Portobello and McAndrew Bay, and 5 between McAndrew Bay and Vauxhall. Those blind corners are, for me, a major risk factor, and when driving to town I have my hand on the horn most of the time in case there are cars coming at me across the centre line. I think we do need some extra safety provisions on those corners, and I would advocate yellow lines if that were possible, to try and increase the awareness of drivers that they are not to cross that yellow line at the corners. Just coming through, I think I'm coming down to sort of the cost too, just to address Councillor Wilson's concerns. I don't agree with the idea of a targeted rate. I could possibly live with the uniform one, given that just the wider benefits of this road to our city, to our profile, to our economy. They are all, the road services all of those big things. It's a major road in terms of the benefits for the city. And just coming down to the sequencing, I mean, we're going to have a debate about that later possibly, but I'm hoping that the value of doing these 2 sections, because I do acknowledge that we've had a good bundle of submissions that are about the risks on Vauxhall to Glenfelloc, but that doing the 2 at once would help us save money overall in light of the
the NZTA subsidies reducing for us. And I think that when the considerations come back from staff, that they hopefully NZTA could have given us the information that would show that we can actually save quite a bit of money in the capital cost of this widening. So I'm going to support the motions before us, but say that and thank Sean and the others in the communities for actually for sticking up for Broad Bay Portobello as having priority.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, subsequent to motion?
Yes.
Apologies, Your Worship. I'm sorry to lengthen this discussion. I would like to move that if any future work on the Portobello safety works be built to the final design standard.
Second.
So that's, would you like to repeat that?
That any future work on the Portobello safety works program be built to the final design. The agreed final design standard.
Seconded by Councillor McTavish.
Final design effectively.
Councillor Wilson, you want to pick off?
No.
Okay, Councillor Benson.
Well, I'd like the mover to explain to us what that means, because if you've got some work planned that's major structural work in terms of widening and probably lifting in some areas because of the doubtless effects of sea level rise and so on, I'm a bit challenged to understand how you could, even if you wanted to, do interim work to the final design somewhere under the later surface.
This is not about the design
That's what I'm asking you
of
to
the
explain.
sea wall. It is about the road safety design, which is about how you put the pedestrian cycles and car lanes in the interim. At present, we have about 2 or 3 different systems down that road, as built to now. We're about to undertake some work at E, which, with all respect, if it is going to be to the same design of that adjoining it, will not satisfy, it isn't to the final design. The final design that we have chosen is that you have pedestrians out on the seaward side, then separated cycling, and then car lanes. And if we build to be consistent with what is there now, we add in a stranded cost that has to be changed later. So what I'm trying to do is to minimise the costs ongoing, albeit appreciating that there will be an inconsistency of design between the sections. It isn't perfect, but it's better than leaving stranded costs.
Can I just go to Mr. Avery, because I think what we're talking about is layout.
Yes.
Not design.
Can I just, maybe a refinement that may or may not satisfy? What you're asking for is that the layout of any new sections that are constructed be done to the agreed design, and that any rework on existing sections do to the same design.
That would be fabulous.
Which we understand.
Yeah.
Whether you need to make a resolution about that, I'm not sure, because we'll just do it that way. Noting that if there's a small part of one of the existing sections that needs some work, then we won't do a bit in the middle of a large section.
With all respect, having seen what was done last, and no complaint to the staff, they were just doing what they were doing. It is, yeah.
Well, can I suggest that what is needed here is a rewording to make it clear what it's meant, because I think that Councillor Benson Pope's question was because there was a confusion between design and layout.
Okay, I'm going to word layout.
Councillor Calvert.
It sounds logical, and you're saying it will save money or something. I just wanted to be clear that this has, if anything, a positive economic effect.
It has a positive capital effect. It will mean that people will potentially be crossing the roads between one design, one layout to another as they go along the various sections. That is slightly counterintuitive to giving a good experience on cyclists in the interim.
So long-term positive social effect, short-term no negative economic effect.
Right. Right, that's a question, just
Sorry,
to clarify from
um,
staff that does this throw up any issues that, from staff's point of view? Yep.
Actually, no.
Thank you. Good. And does that answer your question, Councillor Calvert?
Well, I'm assuming Kate knew what she was talking about, that she's answered my question.
Yep, that's fine. Okay, any further discussion?
It's a very big assumption.
Do you want us to exercise?
No.
I'm going to put it all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And that is, we'll break for lunch now.